Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the Sharingan God, the true master of Alucard. Naruto x Seras Victoria, Hellsing Ultimate. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. Dimensional Convergence. Blood dripped from Naruto's fingertips as he traced ancient symbols onto the weathered stone floor of the abandoned Uchiha shrine. Moonlight filtered through the cracked ceiling, casting elongated shadows across walls adorned with faded clan emblems. 3 days he'd spent sequestered in this forgotten place, translating scripts so old they predated the founding of Konoha itself. "This can't be right," he muttered, azure eyes narrowing as they shifted to a brilliant crimson, 3 tomo spinning lazily around his pupils. The Sharingan, the ocular jutsu, that had defined the Uchiha clan for generations, now resided within him, though he carried not a drop of Uchiha blood. After Sasuke's death in the 4th Great Ninja War, his friend had made the ultimate sacrifice, transferring his eyes to Naruto in a forbidden medical procedure that Sakura had performed with trembling hands and tears streaming down her face. The Sharingan wasn't created by the Sage of Six Paths. Naruto's voice echoed in the empty chamber as he studied the scroll spread before him. It predates him. The manuscript, written in a dialect so ancient that even the Sharingan struggled to decipher it, spoke of crimson eyes born of blood not of this world, and creatures of the night who crossed the veil between realms. Impossible tales of beings who drank blood and lived eternal lives, who could transform into mist and beasts, who had passed some essence of their power into the human bloodlines of what would become the shinobi world. Naruto's fingers traced the intricate diagram at the center of the scroll, a rendering of eyes evolving from simple red irises to the complex patterns of the Mangekyo Sharingan. But beyond that were forms he'd never seen before, patterns that made his borrowed eyes throb with recognition. 27 years old now, the once impulsive shinobi had grown into a man of patience and careful deliberation. 7 years of peace had given him time to master the gift Sasuke had bestowed upon him. No longer did he drain chakra recklessly when using the Sharingan. He had integrated it completely with his natural abilities, with Kurama's power, with the sage mode he had perfected. "What do you think, Kurama?" Naruto asked inwardly, his consciousness brushing against the ancient fox spirit that dwelled within him. "These writings speak of times before even my creation." The Nine Tails rumbled, his voice tinged with rare uncertainty. "Though there is something familiar in them. Memories not my own, perhaps, but echoes of knowledge passed from the sage to us tailed beasts." Naruto nodded, returning his attention to the final passages of the scroll. They detailed a ritual, a forbidden jutsu meant to open pathways between worlds, to seek the source of the Sharingan's power. The warnings were explicit and dire. None who had attempted the journey had returned unchanged, if they returned at all. "I need to understand." Determination hardened in Naruto's voice as he completed the last of the blood symbols. "If the Sharingan truly has origins beyond our world, I need to know what that means for those who carry it now." He thought of Sarada Uchiha, Sasuke's daughter, whose budding Sharingan abilities had begun manifesting in troubling ways, powers that defied conventional understanding of the dojutsu. Nightmares that became reality, shadows that moved according to her will, an unnatural thirst that chakra pills couldn't satisfy. "This is reckless, even for you," Kurama growled. "You risk everything in ancient texts that may be nothing more than delusions." "I've spent years seeking answers in our world and found nothing," Naruto replied, rising to his feet within the completed ritual circle. His hands moved through a complex sequence of signs, some familiar, others so ancient they felt foreign to his fingers. "I promised Sakura I would save her daughter." Chakra surged through his pathways, his own blue energy intertwining with Kurama's crimson power and the unique violet force that emanated from the Sharingan. The blood seals beneath his feet began to glow, first red, then white-hot, burning through the stone into seemingly infinite darkness. "Dimensional path. Crimson origin revelation," Naruto intoned, completing the final hand seal. Reality fractured. The shrine collapsed inward, not into rubble but into nothingness, as if the very fabric of space folded around Naruto. His body felt simultaneously compressed to the size of an atom and stretched across infinite distance. Through it all, his enhanced Sharingan remained active, recording every impossible sensation, every glimpse of worlds flashing past, some familiar, others utterly alien. 1,000 voices whispered in languages he couldn't comprehend. Visions of blood-soaked battlefields, of creatures with crimson eyes and elongated fangs, of ancient castles and modern cities ravaged by warfare. Through the kaleidoscopic chaos, a single word repeated, growing louder until it overwhelmed all other sounds. Alucard. Asterisk. Then silence. Naruto crashed into cold, wet pavement, the impact sending shockwaves of pain through his body. Rain pelled his skin as he struggled to orient himself, the dimensional travel having left his chakra network temporarily disrupted. The air smelled wrong, thick with pollution, gunpowder, and the metallic tang of blood. So much blood. His vision cleared to reveal an unrecognizable urban landscape. Towering buildings of glass and stone. Strange mechanical contraptions lining the streets. Flickering electric lights casting harsh shadows. And corpses. Dozens of them, strewn across the rain-slicked street, their bodies mangled in ways that spoke of violence beyond human capability. Not human, Naruto murmured, his Sharingan identifying the subtle differences in the dead. Many had elongated canines, their flesh already dissolving into ash. Vampires. The creatures from the scroll. A woman's scream pierced the night, followed by automatic weapons fire and inhuman howls. Naruto moved instinctively, body flickering toward the sounds of battle. His chakra network stabilized with each passing second, power flowing more readily through his limbs. He leapt atop a strange metal pole, surveying the chaos below. A lone figure in a tan uniform stood surrounded by approaching monsters, humanoid creatures with glowing red eyes and twisted grins that revealed razor-sharp fangs. The woman, young, blonde, wielding what appeared to be an oversized firearm, fired desperately into the advancing horde. Each shot turning a vampire to dust, but they were too many, too fast. "Police girl, where are you?" she shouted into some device at her shoulder, her British accent unfamiliar to Naruto's ears. "I need immediate backup." Her eyes widened as she ran out of ammunition, the empty clicking of her weapon audible even above the rain. The nearest vampire lunged, claws extended. Naruto dropped from his perch, the familiar spiraling blue energy of a Rasengan forming in his palm as he descended. He slammed the concentrated chakra sphere directly into the attacking vampire, the resulting explosion of energy vaporizing not just his target but 3 others nearby. The young woman stumbled backward, eyes wide with shock as this stranger, dressed in strange black and orange garments, with peculiar marks on his cheeks and eyes that glowed crimson in the darkness, appeared from nowhere. "Stay behind me," Naruto commanded, his voice carrying the authority earned through years of leadership. The remaining vampires hesitated, sensing a new and unfamiliar power. One braver than the rest snarled, "Who the fuck are you supposed to be?" Naruto didn't waste breath on a response. His hands formed a cross sign, and instantly the street filled with 20 identical copies of himself, each solid and independently moving. The woman behind him gasped audibly. "Impossible," she whispered. The vampire horde attacked en masse, and Naruto's shadow clones met them with coordinated precision. Each clone moved with the fluid grace of a master shinobi, employing taijutsu techniques that shattered vampire bones and separated heads from bodies. The original Naruto remained protectively near the woman, his Sharingan tracking every movement in the battle. "What are you?" she managed to ask, reloading her weapon with shaking hands. Naruto glanced at her, taking in her features for the first time, young, perhaps early 20s, with short blonde hair and blue eyes that reflected both fear and determination. Her uniform suggested some kind of military or police organization. "A friend," he answered simply, before turning his attention back to the fight. "What are they?" "Vampires," she confirmed, raising her reloaded weapon, artificial ones created by Millennium. The information meant little to Naruto, but it confirmed the connection to the creatures described in the ancient texts. Before he could inquire further, a new presence made itself known, a towering vampire with strength far surpassing the others. It moved like liquid shadow, tearing through 3 of Naruto's clones before they could react. "Captain!" the woman exclaimed in horror. The vampire captain fixed its gaze on Naruto, blood-red eyes narrowing. "You smell different. Not human, not vampire. What delightful new toy has Hellsing found?" Naruto felt Kurama's energy surging in response to the threat. This one is stronger than the others. It's no mindless beast. I don't know who Hellsing is, Naruto replied, stepping forward as golden chakra began to emanate from his body, forming a luminous cloak around him. But I'm not anyone's toy. The vampire captain's eyes widened at the transformation. What manner of? Naruto vanished from sight, reappearing instantly behind the vampire. Rasenshuriken, the spinning disk of wind nature chakra, compressed and deadly, expanded upon impact, shredding the vampire captain at the cellular level. The creature didn't even have time to scream as its body disintegrated into particles too small to see. The remaining vampires fled, their morale broken by the effortless destruction of their leader. Naruto turned back to the blonde woman, his chakra cloak fading as he approached. She raised her weapon instinctively, though her hands trembled. I'm not going to hurt you, he said gently, raising his hands to show he meant no threat. What are you? She repeated, not lowering her gun. Those eyes. They're like his, but different. His? Naruto questioned. The woman opened her mouth to respond but was interrupted by the sound of approaching vehicles. Bright lights swept the street as several armored transports screeched to a halt around them. Armed personnel in uniforms similar to the woman's poured out, weapons trained on Naruto. Officer Victoria, a commanding female voice called out. Report. The blonde woman, Victoria, apparently, straightened to attention as an imposing figure emerged from the central vehicle. A tall woman with long platinum hair, wearing a tailored suit and round glasses, strode forward with unmistakable authority. Her ice blue eyes assessed the situation with clinical precision before settling on Naruto. Sir Integra, Victoria responded. This man, he saved me from the Millennium Squad. He has abilities I've never seen before. Integra Hellsing's expression remained impassive as she studied the stranger, noting his unusual attire, the curious marks on his cheeks, and most importantly, the crimson eyes that bore a distinctive pattern. Those eyes, she said flatly. They're similar to Alucard's. Naruto deactivated his Sharingan, eyes returning to their natural blue. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I come from elsewhere. I'm seeking information about the origin of these eyes. Integra's posture stiffened. Secure him. Armed men moved to surround Naruto, who made no move to resist. He could have escaped easily. These people posed no real threat to someone of his abilities, but they clearly knew something about the Sharingan's origins. They were his best lead. Sir Integra, Victoria protested. He saved my life, and he'll be treated with appropriate respect, Seras, Integra replied, her tone softening slightly. But anything connected to vampiric abilities requires proper investigation. She addressed Naruto directly. Mr. Uzumaki, I represent the Hellsing organization. We defend England against supernatural threats. If you cooperate, no harm will come to you. Naruto nodded. I understand. I'm looking for answers, not conflict. As the Hellsing personnel escorted him toward one of the vehicles, a prickling sensation at the back of his neck made Naruto turn. At the far end of the street, partially obscured by shadow and mist, stood a figure in a crimson coat and wide-brimmed hat. Though distant, Naruto could clearly see the being's eyes, red like the Sharingan, but with vertical pupils that narrowed as they met his gaze. The figure smiled, revealing elongated fangs, before dissolving into shadows. Did you feel that? Kurama's voice resonated within Naruto. That creature, it's ancient, powerful, and it recognized something in you. Alucard, Seras Victoria whispered, following Naruto's gaze to the now empty street corner. My master. Naruto allowed himself to be guided into the armored vehicle, his mind racing with implications. He had found a world where creatures with powers resembling the Sharingan existed. The scroll's claims were true. There was indeed a connection between these vampires and the dojutsu that had defined the Uchiha clan. As the vehicle pulled away, heading toward what Seras called Hellsing Manor, Naruto sensed he was one step closer to understanding the true nature of the power he had inherited from Sasuke, and perhaps to saving Sarada from whatever transformation had begun to claim her. The dimensional journey had succeeded. But as rain continued to fall on this strange, violent world, Naruto wondered if finding answers would be worth the price he might have to pay. Hellsing Manor loomed against the night sky, its Victorian architecture a stark contrast to the sleek military vehicles now parked in its courtyard. Naruto observed everything with careful attention as he was escorted through imposing oak doors and along corridors lined with portraits of stern-faced men and women, generations of Hellsings, he presumed. They brought him to what appeared to be a study, walls lined with books. A massive desk dominating the center, behind which Sir Integra Hellsing took her seat. The blonde soldier, Seras Victoria, stood uncertainly to one side, while armed guards positioned themselves at the doors. "Leave us," Integra commanded the guards. "Seras, remain." When the doors closed, Integra lit a cigar with practiced movements, studying Naruto through the rising smoke. "Now, Mr. Uzumaki, explain yourself." Naruto considered how much to reveal. These people clearly had knowledge of supernatural abilities, but would they understand concepts like chakra, jutsu, or the complexities of his world? He decided on a simplified version of the truth. "I come from another world, one where special abilities manifest differently than here. In my world, certain bloodlines carry unique powers. The eyes I possess," he activated his Sharingan briefly, "are called the Sharingan. They weren't originally mine, but were given to me by a friend before his death." "Another world," Integra repeated flatly, though her expression betrayed neither disbelief nor acceptance. "And what brought you to ours?" Ancient texts suggesting the origin of these eyes might be found here. They spoke of beings with red eyes who drink blood and live eternal lives. "Vampires," Seras interjected, then flushed slightly when Integra glanced at her. "Indeed," Integra concurred, tapping ash from her cigar. "Though I've never heard of vampiric powers being connected to another realm." Naruto continued, "The writings described a power transfer that happened generations ago, something had crossed between worlds and influenced the development of certain bloodlines in my realm." Integra leaned back in her chair, considering. "Your abilities, they're not typical of vampires in our world. Those duplicates of yourself, the energy weapons you created. Chakra," Naruto explained, "life energy that can be molded and shaped with proper training. Everyone in my world has it to some degree. But bloodline abilities like the Sharingan can enhance how it's used." "And what exactly can these eyes do?" Integra's question carried an edge of caution. Before Naruto could answer, the temperature in the room plummeted. Shadows in the corners deepened, swirling like living ink before coalescing into a humanoid shape. The figure from the street materialized, tall, clad in crimson, with a face that might have been handsome if not for the predatory aura that surrounded him. "They can do many things," the newcomer said, his deep voice resonating with centuries of power. "Copy movements, cast illusions, see through deceptions, predict attacks before they happen." His grin widened, revealing gleaming fangs. "Isn't that right, traveler?" Naruto remained outwardly calm, though his senses heightened to full alert. This being, Alucard, Seras had called him, radiated power unlike anything he'd encountered before. Not chakra as he understood it, but something equally potent. "Master," Seras addressed the vampire, her posture straightening in his presence. "Police girl," Alucard acknowledged without looking at her, his attention fixed entirely on Naruto. "It seems you've found something interesting." "Alucard." Integra's voice carried authority even when addressing this clearly dangerous creature. "You know something about these eyes he possesses." The vampire circled Naruto slowly, like a predator assessing prey, though Naruto noted the caution in his movements. Alucard recognized him as a potential threat. "The eye demons," Alucard finally said, stopping directly before Naruto. "That's what they were called in the ancient texts. Beings who could trap you in illusions so perfect you would live entire lifetimes before realizing you hadn't moved an inch. Who could summon black flames that burned for 7 days and nights? Who could call forth skeletal guardians the size of mountains?" Naruto's eyes widened slightly. The abilities Alucard described matched the man. Gekyo Sharingan's most powerful techniques, Tsukuyomi, Amaterasu, Susanoo. "You've encountered them before," Naruto stated rather than asked. Alucard's grin widened impossibly. "Not personally. Even I am not quite that old. But vampiric memory runs deep, passed through blood from sire to fledgling. The oldest of our kind remembered them, visitors from beyond the veil, with eyes that spun like pinwheels and commanded absolute obedience." Quote, "Obedience." Integra's sharp question cut through the tension. Mind control, Naruto explained, his expression darkening. The Sharingan can cast genjutsu, illusions that control the senses and, at higher levels, the will. Like my master's ability to dominate minds, Seras offered, glancing between Alucard and Naruto. Similar, perhaps, Alucard conceded, though different in execution. Our abilities stem from the corruption of blood and soul. The vampire leaned closer to Naruto, inhaling deeply, his stem from something purer. Energy, not tainted essence. Integra stood, commanding the room's attention. Mr. Uzumaki, while this academic discussion of parallel evolution is fascinating, it doesn't explain why you're here now, or what you intend. Naruto met her gaze steadily. In my world, a child has begun manifesting abilities connected to these eyes that we don't understand, abilities that seem more aligned with what you call vampiric powers than our traditional understanding of the Sharingan. I came seeking knowledge that might help her. A noble quest, Alucard commented, though his tone suggested he found the concept amusing. Crossing dimensions to save a single child. Every life matters, Naruto replied without hesitation. The conviction in his voice caused something in Alucard's expression to shift, a flicker of what might have been respect, quickly masked by his usual sardonic smile. Integra extinguished her cigar in an ashtray. While I sympathize with your situation, Mr. Uzumaki, we're currently engaged in a war against artificial vampires created by a Nazi remnant organization called Millennium. Their attacks on London have escalated recently. I witnessed their handiwork firsthand, Naruto acknowledged. Then perhaps we can help each other, Integra proposed. Assist us in our battle against Millennium, and in return, we'll grant you access to the Hellsing archives, centuries of research on vampiric abilities that might provide the answers you seek. Naruto considered the offer. He hadn't planned to involve himself in this world's conflicts, but he recognized the pragmatism in Integra's proposal. Additionally, facing these artificial vampires might provide practical insights into the connection between vampiric abilities and the Sharingan. I accept, he said after a moment. On the condition that any information I discover that can help the child I mentioned takes priority. Agreed, Integra replied without hesitation. Seras will show you to quarters where you can rest. Tomorrow, we'll brief you fully on Millennium and determine how your unique abilities can best serve our efforts. As if on cue, Seras stepped forward. This way, Mr. Uzumaki. Just Naruto is fine. Alucard's laughter followed them as they left the study, a sound that carried both amusement and anticipation. Oh, this will be interesting indeed. The shinobi and the fledgling vampire. What curious allies fate provides. The room they provided was spacious but Spartan. A bed, a desk, a private bathroom. Military functionality rather than luxury. Naruto sat cross-legged on the floor, entering himself as he had done countless times before, reaching into his mindscape to consult with his oldest companion. Within the mental construct they shared, Kurama lounged in a forest clearing, his massive form dwarfing the surrounding trees. No longer was their shared space the flooded sewer of Naruto's youth. Years of partnership had transformed it into a peaceful reflection of Konoha's forests. Thoughts? Naruto asked the Nine Tails. This world reeks of death and old power, Kurama replied, his tails swishing thoughtfully. The one called Alucard. He carries darkness that rivals my own, though its nature differs. He knows more than he revealed. About the Sharingan, about everything. He's ancient, even by my standards. And he recognized something in your eyes beyond their color and pattern. Naruto nodded, recalling the vampire's intense scrutiny. The connection between Sharingan and vampiric abilities seems real. The question is how it formed, and what it means for Sarada. The young Uchiha girl's condition troubles you greatly, Kurama observed. Her symptoms, bloodthirst, shadow manipulation, dreams that manifest in reality, they align with what we've seen of vampire abilities here. Which means the ancient texts were right. Something crossed between worlds generations ago, influencing the development of the Sharingan. Naruto's expression grew troubled. If vampirism is somehow embedded within the Uchiha bloodline, awakening with each new generation of Sharingan users, then the girl may be experiencing the first true manifestation in centuries. Kurama finished grimly. Perhaps because she's of mixed heritage, or because of changes to the bloodline during the war. Their conversation was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Naruto opened his eyes, returning to full awareness of his physical surroundings. "Come in," he called. The door opened to reveal Seras Victoria, now dressed in a simple uniform fairer than the battle gear she'd worn earlier. She carried a tray with what appeared to be food and a pot of tea. "Sir Integra thought you might be hungry," she explained, setting the tray on the desk. "I'm not sure what people from other dimensions eat, but we have sandwiches and tea." Naruto smiled warmly. "Thank you. Food is food, no matter the world." He rose fluidly to his feet, accepting the offered meal with genuine gratitude. Interdimensional travel had indeed left him famished. Seras lingered, curiosity evident in her expression. "I wanted to properly thank you for saving me earlier. Those vampires would have overwhelmed me if you hadn't appeared." "No thanks necessary," Naruto replied, taking a seat at the desk. "I couldn't stand by and watch someone fight alone against such odds." Seras hesitated, then asked, "May I ask you some questions? If you're not too tired." Naruto gestured to the room's single chair. "Please." As Seras sat, Naruto noticed details he'd missed in the chaos of their first meeting. Her eyes, though blue, carried a faint reddish tint in certain light. Her canines, while not as pronounced as Alucard's, were slightly elongated. And something about her chakra signature, or what passed for chakra in this world, felt both human and not. "You're a vampire," he stated gently, but recently turned. Seras blinked in surprise. "How did you know? Your energy signature is in flux, part human, part something else. And your physical features show subtle signs of transformation." "Master Alucard turned me a few months ago," she confirmed. "I was dying, and he offered me a choice. I chose to live, but..." She looked down at her hands. "I'm still learning what that means." Naruto nodded understanding. "I sensed something similar in Sarada, the child I mentioned. Human, but gradually becoming something else. Is that why you came here? To understand what's happening to her?" "Partly," Naruto acknowledged, "but also to find a way to help her control it. From what I've seen, vampires in your world vary greatly in their abilities and their humanity." Seras's expression darkened. "The artificial vampires Millennium creates are TTLE more than monsters, human cruelty amplified by bloodlust. Master Alucard is different, powerful, ancient, but governed by codes and bonds I don't fully understand." She met Naruto's gaze directly. "And then there's me, caught somewhere in between, human enough to regret what I'm becoming, vampire enough to feel the hunger. The struggle between human conscience and inhuman power," Naruto murmured. "I understand that better than you might think." "Indeed you do," Kurama commented internally with dark humor. Seras leaned forward slightly. "Your eyes, the Sharingan, you called them. Are they what makes you different in your world?" "One aspect of it," Naruto replied. "In my world, I contain a being of immense power called Kurama, a tailed beast sealed within me at birth. For many years, people feared and hated me because of what I contained, not who I was." "Like being a vampire here," Seras said softly. "Feared for what you are rather than who you are." Naruto nodded. "Exactly. I learned to control Kurama's power. To work with him rather than against him. We became partners rather than jailer and prisoner." He smiled slightly. "That's what I hope to teach Sarada, that whatever changes are happening within her, she can master them without losing herself." "Do you think?" Seras hesitated, vulnerability flashing across her features. "Do you think someone like me could do the same? Find balance?" Before Naruto could answer, a crimson mist seeped under the door, materializing into Alucard's imposing form. The ancient vampire's sudden appearance startled Seras, who jumped to her feet. Master, I was just fraternizing with our dimensional guest." Alucard's voice carried amusement rather than disapproval. "Seeking wisdom from foreign sources, police girl." Seras flushed. "I was thanking him for his help earlier." Alucard's gaze shifted to Naruto, who had remained seated, outwardly unperturbed by the vampire's dramatic entrance. "The young always seek shortcuts to power and control. They don't understand that true mastery comes through suffering and time." His grin widened. "Isn't that right, Sharingan wielder?" Naruto met the vampire's gaze steadily. "Some lessons can only be learned through pain. Others can be taught by those who've already walked the path. And which are you offering my fledgling? Pain or guidance? Whichever she needs, Naruto replied without hesitation. Though I suspect she's had enough of the former. Something like appreciation flickered across Alucard's features. Interesting. You speak with the conviction of one who has earned his wisdom. He turned to Seras. Leave us, police girl. Sir Integra has preparations that require your attention. Though clearly reluctant, Seras nodded. Yes, master. She glanced at Naruto. Thank you for the conversation. When the door closed behind her, Alucard's demeanor shifted subtly, the theatrical malice receding, replaced by calculating assessment. Now, shinobi, he said. The term falling from his lips with perfect pronunciation, let us speak plainly. Your eyes carry power that should not exist in this world. They resonate with ancient memories in my blood, memories of beings who walked between realities as easily as mortals walk between rooms. Naruto's eyes narrowed. You know more than you revealed to Integra. Naturally, Alucard conceded with a dismissive wave. Some knowledge is dangerous even to those who command monsters. He approached the desk, looming over Naruto. The connection you seek to understand, between your Sharingan and vampiric essence, is more direct than you realize. Explain, Naruto prompted, rising to stand eye to eye with the vampire. The beings remembered in vampiric blood memory, the eye demons, as they were Kai. They weren't visitors from another world. They were vampires who evolved differently. Alucard's voice dropped lower, resonating with ancient certainty. The oldest vampires developed unique abilities based on their nature and experiences. Some commanded beasts, others manipulated minds or elements. And some developed eye-based powers, Naruto concluded. Precisely. Eyes that could trap victims in illusions, predict movements, copy abilities. Alucard spread his hands. Sound familiar? Naruto processed this information, connecting it with what he'd learned from the ancient scrolls. So, the Sharingan didn't originate in my world at all. It came from vampire blood that somehow crossed between dimensions. Blood is the currency of soul and power, Alucard confirmed. In the ancient past, when the barriers between worlds were thinner, essence could transfer across realms. A vampire lord with the evolved eye abilities must have somehow passed his blood to your world, where it manifested differently in human bloodlines. Quote, the Uchiha clan, Naruto murmured. And now Sarada's condition suggests the original vampire essence is reasserting itself, Alucard finished. Fascinating, isn't it? After generations of dilution and transformation, the primal nature returns. The implications were staggering. If Alucard was right, then the Sharingan had always been vampiric in origin. Its true nature suppressed or transformed by generations of adaptation to the chakra-rich environment of the shinobi world. Can it be controlled? Naruto asked directly. This reversion to vampiric nature, can Sarada master it without losing her humanity? Alucard's expression turned contemplative. That depends on many factors. Her strength of will, the purity of the blood awakening within her, the guidance she receives. His crimson gaze intensified. And perhaps on what you learn here, in the world where her power truly began. Is that why you've come to speak with me privately? To offer guidance? Alucard laughed, a sound that seemed to echo from centuries past. Guidance? No, I came out of curiosity. Your eyes intrigue me, shinobi. They carry power similar to my own, yet fundamentally different in nature. Corrupted by purity, one might say, rather than purified by corruption. He moved to the window, gazing out at the moonlit grounds of the Hellsing estate. The war with Millennium grows more complex by the day. They seek to create artificial vampires, but their methods are crude, their results unstable. Your arrival, with abilities that bridge vampire and human power, presents possibilities. I didn't come to be a weapon in your war, Naruto stated firmly. No, Alucard conceded, turning back with an unreadable expression. You came for knowledge, but knowledge, rarely comes without cost in any world. His form began to dissolve into mist once more. Rest well, Naruto Uzumaki. Tomorrow, you begin to earn your answers. As the vampire's presence faded from the room, Naruto sat heavily on the edge of the bed, mind racing with revelations and new questions. The vampire speaks truth, Kurama rumbled within him. I can sense it. The Sharingan's origins have always been shrouded in mystery, even to the Sage of Six Paths. If he's right, Naruto replied inwardly, then Sarada isn't suffering from some new condition. She's experiencing the awakening of what was always there, buried in her bloodline, which means the answer to helping her might indeed lie in this world, learning how vampires like Seras maintain their humanity while embracing their nature. Naruto nodded, decision crystallizing. He would honor his agreement with Integra, fighting alongside Hellsing against Millennium. But his primary goal remained clear, understanding the vampiric origins of the Sharingan to help Sarada control her awakening powers without sacrificing her human conscience. Outside his window, London's skyline glittered with electric lights, so different from Konoha's simpler illumination. Two worlds, connected by ancient blood and power. As Naruto finally allowed exhaustion to claim him, his last thought was of Sarada's frightened eyes as shadows had danced at her command. And her whispered plea, "Help me understand what I'm becoming." He had promised he would. And Naruto Uzumaki never went back on his word. Dawn arrived with the sound of explosions. Naruto was instantly alert, years of battlefield experience dispelling sleep in a heartbeat. He moved to the window as Kurama's chakra automatically flowed to his senses, enhancing his perception. London's skyline was marred by plumes of smoke rising from at least 3 locations. Anti-aircraft guns fired skyward, tracking objects Naruto couldn't immediately identify. His door burst open without warning. Seras stood in the doorway, now clad in battle gear, a massive cannon-like weapon slung over her shoulder. "We're under attack," she announced unnecessarily. "Sir Gra requests your presence in the war room immediately." Naruto nodded, already adjusting his equipment. He followed Seras through corridors now buzzing with armed personnel, Hellsing's forces mobilizing for combat. They descended several floors to a reinforced underground level where technology far beyond anything in the shinobi world lined the walls. Screens displaying real-time footage, communications equipment, advanced weaponry. Integra stood before a large central display, issuing orders with calm precision. She acknowledged Naruto's arrival with a curt nod. "Millennium has launched a coordinated attack against multiple targets across London," she explained without preamble. "This is larger than their previous operations. They're targeting civil infrastructure as well as military installations. Testing defenses," Naruto observed, studying the tactical display. "Drawing out your forces to assess strength and response patterns." Integra's eyebrow raised slightly. "You have military experience." "I've fought in a war that spanned nations," Naruto replied simply. "These patterns are familiar." "Then your insight is welcome." Integra gestured to the map. "We have 3 primary attack zones, the Financial District, Trafalgar Square, and the Westminster area. Our conventional forces are deploying to all 3, but they'll be outmatched against Millennium's artificial vampires." "Where is Alucard?" Naruto asked, noting the vampire's absence. "Already engaged at Westminster," Seras answered. "My master operates independently when possible." Integra turned to face Naruto directly. "This attack provides an opportunity for you to demonstrate your capabilities in our world. I'm assigning you to the Financial District. It's experiencing the heaviest concentration of vampire forces." Naruto nodded understanding. "And Seras will accompany you," Integra decided. "Her familiarity with London counterbalances your greater combat experience." Seras looked momentarily surprised but quickly composed herself. "Yes, sir. One more thing," Integra added, her expression grave. "Millennium creates their artificial vampires through implanted chips, technology combined with occult methods. If possible, secure one of these chips intact. Our researchers believe they might provide insight into how vampiric abilities are transferred or modified, information potentially relevant to your quest." The connection wasn't lost on Naruto. If Millennium had found ways to artificially implant vampiric powers, their methods might shed light on how such abilities had transferred between dimensions to create the Sharingan. "Understood," he acknowledged. Integra handed Seras a communication device. "Maintain contact. If the situation exceeds your capabilities, withdraw immediately. We cannot afford to lose either of you." Minutes later, Naruto and Seras were in an armored vehicle speeding through London's streets. The driver navigated with practiced efficiency, taking routes that avoided civilian congestion in known attack zones. "I've never been paired with anyone besides Master Alucard," Seras commented, checking her massive weapon, the Harkonnen cannon, she'd called it. He usually keeps me in reserve unless the situation is truly dire. You're more capable than he acknowledges, Naruto observed. I saw that yesterday. Seras glanced at him, surprise evident in her expression. That's kind of you to say. It's not kindness, just observation, Naruto replied. Your vampiric abilities are still developing, but your combat instincts are solid. You don't hesitate when action is required. A faint blush colored Seras's cheeks. I was police before joining Hellsing. Special forces. It shows. Naruto turned his attention to the approaching battlefield. Smoke rose from between skyscrapers ahead, massive glass and steel structures unlike anything in his world. These artificial vampires, what are their capabilities compared to natural ones like you and Alucard? Weaker individually, Seras explained, professional focus returning to her voice. They heal quickly but not instantly. They're stronger and faster than humans but lack the more exotic abilities Master possesses: shapeshifting, teleportation, familiar control. What makes them dangerous is their numbers and their lack of restraint. And their organization, Naruto added, noting the coordinated nature of the attacks on the tactical displays. Someone intelligent is directing them. The Major, Seras confirmed grimly. We don't know much about him except that he survived Fr. Nazi Germany and has spent decades perfecting artificial vampire creation. The vehicle skidded to a halt at a military barricade where Hellsing soldiers held position. Beyond them, chaos reigned, burning vehicles, shattered glass from towering buildings, civilians fleeing in terror as uniformed figures with inhuman movement patterns advanced systematically through the financial district. Primary targets appear to be the Bank of England and the Stock Exchange, the unit commander reported as Naruto and Seras exited the vehicle. We've established a perimeter, but they're breaking through faster than we can reinforce. Naruto surveyed the battlefield, his tactical mind assessing options. Seras, your weapon has range and power. Take position on that structure. He pointed to a mid-rise building with good sight lines. I'll engage directly and drive them toward your field of fire. The commander looked skeptical. No offense, sir, but these aren't conventional enemies. They'll tear apart a single combatant. No matter how skilled. Naruto smiled slightly. Then it's good I'm not a conventional combatant. Before further objections could be raised, Naruto formed a familiar hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. 50 perfect duplicates of himself materialized in a puff of smoke, each solid and independently capable. The Hellsing soldiers stared in stunned silence. Jesus Christ, one whispered. Spread out. Naruto commanded his clones. Engage and redirect toward the kill zone. Capture one with a chip intact. As his duplicates moved out in coordinated formation, Naruto turned to Seras, who was watching with undisguised amazement. That position, he reminded her, pointing again to the building he'd indicated. Seras snapped back to focus. Right, she hefted her CA.N and moved with surprising speed for someone carrying such a massive weapon. Naruto faced the approaching vampire forces, activated his Sharingan, and charged directly into the fray. The artificial vampires moved with unnatural speed. But to Naruto's enhanced perception, they might as well have been moving through water. His Sharingan tracked every movement, predicted every attack, identified weaknesses in their formation. He weaved between them, a Rasengan forming in each hand as he struck with precision. Unlike conventional enemies, these vampires didn't fall to single strikes, even WITH chakra-enhanced attacks tearing through flesh and bone. They regenerated rapidly, wounds closing even as Naruto moved to his next target. But regeneration took time and energy, and each successive injury slowed them further. Adapt strategy, he called to his clones, who immediately understood his intent. The clones modified their approach, now focusing on disabling rather than destroying, severing limbs, removing heads, inflicting damage that required significant regenerative focus. As the vampires devoted energy to healing, they became vulnerable to being herded toward Seras's position. The thunderous report of the Harkonnen cannon announced Seras joining the battle. Explosive rounds tore through clustered vampires, turning them to ash before regeneration could begin. Her accuracy as impressive, each shot calculated to maximize casualties while avoiding Naruto's clones. These creatures, Kurama observed as Naruto engaged a particularly resilient vampire in close combat. Their power feels artificial, like a poor copy of the real thing. Like white Zetsu compared to real shinobi, Naruto agreed, driving a Rasengan through his opponent's chest. Mass-produced rather than naturally evolved. The vampire staggered back, a massive hole where its heart should be, yet still it grinned malevolently. "You're different," it hissed, voice gurgling through blood. "Not Hellsing's usual dog. I'm nobody's dog," Naruto replied, forming hand signs for a wind technique. Wind style. Vacuum blade. The compressed air sliced cleanly through the vampire's neck, separating head from body. Both parts collapsed, the regeneration finally failing. Across the battlefield, Naruto's clones were systematically dismantling the vampire forces, herding survivors toward Seras's K-ill zone where explosive rounds reduced them to ash. The Hellsing soldiers had rallied, providing supporting fire and securing areas cleared of enemies. Naruto pressed deeper into enemy territory, approaching what appeared to be a command vehicle, a modified armored transport with communications equipment visible through its windows. 3 clones converged on the vehicle while Naruto himself engaged the guards, vampires wearing distinctive uniforms that marked them as officers. "The primary target is the command structure," one of the officers snarled to another as they faced Naruto. "The major wants." He never finished the sentence as Naruto's kunai, enhanced with wind chakra, pierced his throat. The second officer lunged with inhuman speed, claws extended, only to find himself impaled on a spiraling sphere of chakra. Rasengan. The vampire was thrown backward, body crumpling against the command vehicle's armored side. Unlike the others, he didn't immediately begin regenerating. The concentrated chakra had disrupted his cellular structure too thoroughly. This one, Naruto instructed his nearest clone. "Secure him for the chip extraction." As his clone moved to comply, a new presence made itself known. A figure leaping from the command vehicle's roof, moving with greater speed and precision than the other artificial vampires. Tall, muscular, wearing a modified Wehrmacht cap, Toyn's uniform and glasses that glinted in the morning light. "Interesting," the newcomer commented in German accented English. "The Hellsing dogs have found new allies with unusual tricks." Naruto's Sharingan analyzed the newcomer instantly. His chakra signature, or this world's equivalent, burned brighter. His movements carried greater purpose and skill. "A commander, not a foot soldier." Captain Hans Gunsha. Seras's voice crackled through the communication device Naruto carried. "One of the major's elite. Be careful, he's far stronger than the others." As if to demonstrate this fact, the captain moved, a blur even to Naruto's enhanced perception, and destroyed 3 shadow clones with brutally efficient strikes before any could react. Naruto narrowed his eyes, reassessing the threat level. This opponent required more than basic techniques. Golden chakra began to emanate from his body as he activated his Nine Tails mode, the energy forming a luminous cloak around him. The captain paused, observing this transformation with clinical interest. Then, to Naruto's surprise, the man underwent a transformation of his own, his body elongating, face extending into a lupine muzzle, white fur erupting across his form until a massive werewolf stood where the human had been. Werewolf. Naruto couldn't hide his surprise. This world's supernatural elements were more varied than he'd anticipated. The werewolf captain launched himself forward with explosive force. Naruto met the charge directly, enhanced strength matching the creature's supernatural power. They clashed in a flurry of strikes too fast for normal eyes to follow. Claws against chakra-reinforced limbs, bestial strength against Jinchuriki power. Naruto found himself genuinely challenged for the first time since arriving in this world. The captain fought with centuries of experience, his regenerative abilities rivaling Naruto's own, his strength and speed forcing Naruto to draw more deeply on Kurama's power. A Moss. Sieve Paw swipe connected with Naruto's chest, sending him crashing through the wall of a nearby building. He recovered instantly, forming a familiar cross sign. Multi-shadow clone jutsu. 100 clones filled the shattered office space, each glowing with Nine Tails chakra. They swarmed the captain from all directions, forcing the werewolf to defend against simultaneous attacks from every angle. Even with his supernatural abilities, the captain couldn't counter every clone. For each one he destroyed, 3 more landed solid hits, gradually wearing down his defenses. When the captain attempted to retreat to open ground, he found his escape route blocked by Naruto's clones. Now, Seras, Naruto called into his communication device. The Harkonnen's distinctive report echoed across the battlefield. The explosive round struck the captain directly, engulfing him in a fireball that consumed half the building's facade. When the smoke cleared, the werewolf stood severely wounded. Portio. NS of his fur and flesh burned away to reveal gleaming metal beneath. A cyborg, Naruto's eyes narrowed as his Sharingan analyzed the revealed components, technology integrated with flesh and bone. He werewolf's body was already regenerating, metal components reconstructing alongside biological tissue. Before the captain could fully recover, Naruto unleashed his most powerful standard technique. Chakra spiraled in his palm. Compressed to its limits, wind nature added to create cutting edges around the sphere. Wind style. Rasenshuriken. The spinning disk of chakra expanded on impact. Lions of microscopic wind blades shredding the captain at the cellular level. The werewolf's regenerative abilities couldn't counter damage on such a scale. Each attempt to heal was cut apart by the continuing assault of wind chakra. When the technique finally dissipated, the captain remained standing for one impossible moment, a testament to his supernatural will, before collapsing into components too damaged to maintain cohesion. Naruto approached cautiously, his Sharingan confirming the threat was neutralized. Among the remains, a metallic chip glinted, similar to but more advanced than those in the standard artificial vampires. Target secured, he reported into the communication device. Command structure neutralized. Acknowledged, Integra's voice replied. The financial district attack is breaking down. Without leadership, the remaining forces are disorganized. Standard cleanup procedures are underway. Naruto carefully retrieved the chip, noting its construction, a blend of technology and what appeared to be crystallized blood. The integration of biological and mechanical elements reminded him of Orochimaru's experiments, though executed with different principles. Seras appeared at his side. Her cannon slung over her shoulder, eyes wide as she surveyed the devastation Naruto had unleashed. She seemed at a loss for words. I've never seen anyone besides Master Alucard fight at that level. Naruto deactivated his Nine Tails mode, chakra cloak fading as his eyes returned to their normal blue. The captain was formidable, combining werewolf abilities with technology. Is that common in your world? No, Seras shook her head. The captain is unique even among Millennium's forces. A true werewolf is rare enough, but one modified with their technology. She studied the remains with professional detachment. Sir Integra will want everything collected for analysis. As Hellsing personnel secured the area, Naruto contemplated what he'd learned in this first true engagement. The artificial vampires represented one approach to transferring supernatural abilities, technological rather than biological. Yet the captain demonstrated that technology and supernatural essence could be integrated, creating something that transcended both. These might be the answers I've been seeking, he murmured, examining the chip. If Millennium has found ways to transfer vampiric abilities artificially, then it might explain how such abilities crossed between worlds in ancient times, Seras concluded, following his reasoning. Though I can't imagine air methods are anything like what would have happened naturally. Sometimes understanding the artificial helps illuminate the natural, Naruto replied. In my world, studying forbidden techniques often revealed truths about how chakra naturally functions. Their conversation was interrupted by renewed communications from Hellsing Manor. Integra's voice carried urgency that hadn't been present before. All forces, be advised. We have confirmation that Millennium has deployed their airship fleet. This morning's attacks were diversions, their main force is only now engaging. All units return to base immediately for reassignment. Seras's expression turned grave. The airships, their massive mobile bases filled with artificial vampires and weapons. If they've launched the fleet, then this was just the beginning. Naruto finished, understanding the strategic implications immediately. As they made their way to the extraction point, Naruto watched London's skyline where distant Hapes now appeared. Massive dirigibles emerging from cloud cover, their hulls adorned with symbols he didn't recognize but whose meaning was clear enough: conquest. The war had escalated, and with it, Naruto's chances of finding the knowledge he sought to save Sarada. For the ancient connection between vampires and the Sharingan was no longer merely a historical curiosity, it had become the key to understanding powers that threatened both this world and his own. Behind them, the financial district burned, a herald of greater destruction to come. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Blood and Chakra. Hellsing Manor's subterranean levels stretched deeper than Naruto had initially suspected. Beyond the war room where they'd coordinated the morning's defense lay corridors of reinforced concrete, heavy STEL doors marked with symbols unfamiliar to the shinobi, and chambers whose purposes he could only guess at. The air grew colder with each descending staircase, carrying the sterile scent of disinfectant. NT mingled with something older, a metallic tang that reminded him of blood. Sir Integra Hellsing walked 3 paces ahead, her platinum hair a beacon in the dim lighting. She had not spoken since ordering him to follow her from the debriefing session. Behind them came Walter C. Dornez, the elderly butler whose deferential manner belied the deadly precision with which he had orchestrated the retrieval teams. Naruto's Sharingan had immediately identified the man as far more dangerous than his appearance suggested. His chakra pathways, or this world's equivalent, showed patterns consistent with decades of combat conditioning. The procession halted before a circular chamber whose door bore the Hellsing family crest intertwined with symbols of warding. Integra pressed her palm against a scanner, spoke words too low for even Naruto's enhanced hearing to detect, and the massive portal swung inward with the whisper of perfectly balanced mechanisms. "Our archive," she announced, stepping aside to allow Naruto entry. Knowledge collected by 12 generations of Hellsings, documenting the supernatural in all its forms. The circular room soared upward 3 stories, its walls lined with books, scrolls, and artifacts encased in protective glass. At its center stood a round table of polished oak, surrounded by 12 high-backed chairs carved with different crests, the symbols of organizations or families, Naruto presumed. Only 3 places were set with folders and writing implements. "Your promised cooperation during this morning's attack was impressive," Integra stated, taking the chair marked with the Hellsing crest. Captain Bernadotte's report details abilities that exceed even Alucard's in certain respects. "Different, not necessarily superior," Walter corrected gently, setting out cups of steaming tea before each place. "Though the capacity to create autonomous duplicates would certainly change our tactical approach." Naruto remained standing, his gaze drawn to a particular display case near the table. Within it lay a scroll whose calligraphy bore striking similarities to the ancient text he'd discovered in the Uchiha shrine. "That document," he indicated with a nod. "It's written in the same script as records from my world." Integra and Walter exchanged glances. "The Abraham Codex," Walter identified the item. "Recovered during Sir Abraham Van Helsing G's confrontation with the vampire Dracula in 1897. The script has defied translation for over a century. It speaks of blood rituals," Naruto said, his Sharingan activating automatically as he studied the visible portion. "Ways to transfer power between beings of different natures. The dialect is archaic, but similar to texts preserved by the Uzumaki clan, my mother's people, who specialized in sealing techniques." Integra leaned forward, interest sharpening her gaze. "You can read it." "Partially," Naruto admitted. "The technical terminology is specialized, referring to concepts that may have different names in your world." He turned to face her directly. "This is why you brought me here, isn't it? Not just to show me your resources, but to test whether I could access knowledge your organization has been unable to decipher." Quote. A thin smile curved Integra's lips. "Perceptive. Please, sit." Naruto took the chair opposite her, noting that the 3rd place remained empty. "I presume we're waiting for someone else." "Indeed," came a voice from the shadows, deep and resonant with barely suppressed amusement. Alucard materialized from darkness that seemed to gather itself specifically for his entrance. No longer wearing his red coat and hat, the ancient vampire now appeared in an antiquated suit of Victorian styling, his cravat snow-white against the black fabric. He took the THIRD chair with casual grace that nonetheless conveyed centuries of authority. "My master wishes to understand exactly what manner of being we've allied ourselves with," Alucard explained, crimson eyes gleaming with predatory interest. "I've advised a more direct approach than mere conversation." "You want to see my blood," Naruto stated matter-of-factly. Integra's eyebrows rose fractionally. "Precisely. Vampiric blood memory carries information no interrogation could extract: genetic history, inherited memories, the true nature of one's power. And you believe my blood would reveal the connection between the Sharingan and vampire abilities, Naruto concluded. He considered briefly, then shook his head. That won't work as you expect. Oh, Alucard's grin widened, revealing elongated canines. Do enlighten us, traveler. Quote, my physiology isn't standard human, Naruto explained. I am a Jinchuriki, a human vessel containing a tailed beast whose chakra has altered my biological processes since infancy. Additionally, the Sharingan I possess wasn't mine by birth but was transplanted, the eyes of my closest friend, given as he died. Not to mention what would happen if this ancient leech tried to feed on our chakra. Kurama's voice rumbled within Naruto's mindscape, his tone mixing amusement with territorial warning. Furthermore, Naruto continued, I suspect attempting to drink my blood would be unpleasant for you, Alucard. Kurama doesn't share well. The vampire's expression shifted from amused interest to genuine intrigue. The entity you contain, it's sentient. Fully, Naruto confirmed. Kurama has been my partner for years, though our relationship wasn't always so cordial. Integra tapped a manicured nail against the polished wood. Then we'll need to rely on more conventional methods. Tell us about your world, Mr. Uzumaki. Specifically, what you know of the Sharingan's origins and the condition affecting the child you mentioned. Naruto nodded, organizing his thoughts. Over the next hour, he detailed the essential structure of the shinobi world, the 5 great nations, the hidden villages, the nature of chakra and its manipulation through jutsu. He explained the bloodline abilities that ran through certain clans, with particular focus on the Uchiha and their dojutsu. The Sharingan manifests in stages, he clarified, activating his own eyes to demonstrate. First with a single tomo, then 2, then 3, allowing progressively greater visual acuity, movement prediction, and genjutsu capacity. Illusions, Integra noted, studying his eyes with clinical detachment. Yes, though, illusion understates their power, Naruto corrected. The highest level genjutsu can trap victims in subjective time streams where they experience years while mere seconds pass in reality. They can induce paralysis, unconsciousness, even death through sheer psychological trauma. Mind domination, Alucard murmured, a note of recognition in his voice. Like the vampire's mesmerism, but refined to an art. Beyond the standard Sharingan lies the Mangekyo, Naruto continued, allowing his eyes to evolve to their more complex pattern. Awakened, through trauma, typically witnessing or causing the death of someone precious to the user. Each Mangekyo manifests unique abilities. Sasuke's, the eyes I now carry, control black flames that burn for Ven days and can manipulate them into shapes. Amaterasu, Alucard whispered, the ancient name falling from his lips with perfect pronunciation. Naruto's gaze snapped to the vampire. How do you know that name? Blood memory, Alucard replied, his expression uncharacteristically solemn. The oldest vampires passed down tales of crimson-eyed demons who commanded black flames named for a sun goddess. Flames that consumed everything they touched, that could not be extinguished by water or smothered by earth. Walter, who had been taking meticulous notes, paused in his writing. The mythology aligns with actual abilities. Fascinating. Sarada Uchiha, Naruto resumed, focusing on his purpose. Daughter of Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno. 12 years old, manifested her Sharingan earlier than most. With a standard progression through the Tomo stages. 6 months ago, she began exhibiting anomalies. Define anomalies, Integra prompted. Shadow manipulation beyond any known Sharingan capability. Dreams that materialize in the waking world. Enhanced physical attributes even when not channeling chakra. Naruto's expression darkened, and bloodthirst, subtle at first, managed. With soldier pills and plasma supplements, but growing stronger. Medical tests show changes in her cellular structure that our healers don't understand. The vampire essence reasserting itself, Alucard concluded, leaning back in his chair. After generations of adaptation to your world's energies, something has triggered a reversion to the original nature. That's my theory, Naruto agreed. Which is why I performed the dimensional transit ritual, to find the source of these abilities and learn how to help Sarada control them without losing her humanity. Integra set down her teacup with a decisive click. The timing of your arrival is either extraordinarily fortunate or suspiciously convenient, Mr. Uzumaki. Millennium's artificial vampires represent the most comprehensive attempt to understand and replicate vampiric essence since the Impaler's original transformation. She glanced at Alucard, whose grin widened at the reference. If your goal is to understand how such essence can be controlled rather than controlling its bearer, then Millennium's research could provide insights. Naruto finished the thought. Even as a negative example, showing what approaches fail or corrupt the host. Walter cleared his throat discreetly. Sir Integra, the chip recovered from Captain Han's Gunsha has been preliminarily analyzed. Dr. Trevelyan reports it contains both technological components and biological material of a nature not previously documented in Millennium Standard units. The captain was different, Naruto confirmed. A werewolf with cybernetic enhancements. His regenerative capabilities exceeded the standard artificial vampires by an order of magnitude. A prototype, perhaps, Integra mused. Millennium has always sought to combine supernatural essence with modern technology, a perversion of both, in our estimation. She fixed Naruto with an evaluative stare. Your world appears to have taken a different approach, integrating these powers into human bloodlines. Passing them through natural inheritance rather than artificial implantation. That's our understanding, though the scroll I discovered suggests the initial transfer was neither natural nor painless. Naruto hesitated, then added, the text spoke of sacrifice beyond measure, and blood paid in fullest portion, to establish what would become the Sharingan in human hosts. Alucard's Lao, Ghtr echoed in the chamber, a sound of genuine amusement rather than his usual sardonic mirth. Of course, power demands sacrifice. The greater the power, the greater the price. His crimson gaze locked with Naruto's. What price did you pay for your borrowed eyes, shinobi? The question struck uncomfortably close to still tender grief. Sasuke gave his life to end a war that would have consumed our world. His eyes were his final gift, entrusted to me because he believed I would use their power for protection rather than dominance. Something like respect flickered across the vampire's features. Noble sentiment. Whether it proves wise, time will tell. A sudden commotion from the corridor outside interrupted their exchange. Raised voices, hurried footsteps, the metallic sound of weapons being readied. Walter moved to the door with surprising speed for one of his apparent age, opening it to reveal a Hellsing soldier whose expression conveyed urgent news. Sir Integra, the perimeter. Sensors have detected an anomaly identical to the energy signature recorded when Mr. Uzumaki arrived. Something's coming through from the other dimension. Naruto was on his feet instantly. Where? The Eastern Gardens, sir. Energy readings are building rapidly. Without waiting for permission, Naruto moved, not running but employing the body flicker technique that compressed distance through chakra-enhanced speed. He was outside the manor and crossing the immaculate grounds before the others had left the archive chamber. The Eastern Gardens lay in pre-dawn shadow, dew glistening on Manaku. Red hedges and carefully cultivated roses. At their center, reality itself seemed to fold inward, a distortion in space that pulsed with chakra signatures Naruto instantly recognized. Hinata, he whispered, hope and concern mingling in his voice. The dimensional rift expanded, crackling with energy that scorched the surrounding vegetation. From its swirling center emerged a figure, feminine, graceful even in obvious distress. Her lavender eyes wide with determination as she half fell, half stepped onto the grass of an alien world. Hinata Hyuga had changed in the years since the war. Now 26, she had grown into her role as clan head with quiet dignity that commanded respect throughout Konoha. Her midnight blue hair fell to her waist, framing a face whose delicate beauty had matured into striking elegance. The traditional Hyuga robes she wore bore scorch marks and tears, evidence of a difficult passage. Naruto-kun, she gasped, swaying on her feet. I found you. He caught her before she could fall, supporting her weight with gentle strength. Hinata, what are you doing here? The dimensional transit jutsu is dangerous, it could have killed you. A small, determined smile curved her lips. When has danger ever stopped me from following you? Her Byakugan activated briefly, veins bulging around her eyes as she scanned their surroundings. This place, its chakra flows are unlike anything I've seen. It's another world entirely, Naruto confirmed, concerned by how pale she appeared. One connected to the Sharingan's origins. The rift behind Hinata collapsed with a thunderous implosion, leaving a circular patch of blackened earth. Moments later, Hellsing forces arrived, armed soldiers forming a perimeter around them, followed closely by Integra, Walter, and Alucard. Another visitor, Integra observed, her tone neutral but her posture tense. A comrade of yours, Mr. Uzumaki. My wife, Naruto corrected, still supporting Hinata's trembling form. Hinata Hyuga, head of the Hyuga clan and carrier of a different dojutsu, the Byakugan. This disclosure visibly surprised the Hellsing leaders, though for different reasons. Integra's expression suggested calculation of diplomatic considerations. Walter's professional mask slipped just enough to reveal genuine curiosity. Alucard's reaction was most pronounced, a widening grin that spoke of delighted intrigue. Two different eye powers from the same world. The vampire mused aloud, how fascinating. Tell me, Lady Hyuga, what wonders do your pale eyes perceive that others cannot? Hinata straightened, drawing on her training as clan head to present dignity despite her weakened state. The Byakugan sees chakra networks, penetrates solid matter, and perceives in nearly 360 degrees around its user. Her tone remained polite but carried a hint of steel, and it sees clearly through deception, including yours, Vampire-san. Alucard threw back his head and laughed, a genuine sound of surprised delight. Magnificent, not cowed in the slightest, despite barely being able to stand. I begin to understand your taste in companions, Shinobi. She needs medical attention, Naruto interjected, noting how Hinata's chakra fluctuated erratically, a sign of severe depletion. The dimensional transit takes a heavy toll, especially without proper preparation. Integra nodded. Walter, arrange accommodations and medical care. She addressed Hinata directly. Lady Hyuga, while your arrival was unexpected, the Hellsing organization extends the same provisional alliance offered to your husband. Once you've recovered, we'll discuss the implications of your presence here. Thank you, Hinata replied with formal grace. I apologize for the intrusion, but matters in our world have grown urgent. She turned to Naruto, lowering her voice. Sarada's condition has worsened. Sakura sent me with data from the latest tests and a message. We have 3 months, at most, before the changes become irreversible. The gravity of this news settled over Naruto like a physical weight. 3 months to find answers in a world embroiled in its own supernatural war. The timeline had just compressed dramatically. I understand, he responded, helping Hinata toward the manor. We'll talk once you've rested. As medical personnel took charge of Hinata's care, Integra drew Naruto aside. Your wife's arrival changes our strategic considerations. 2 shinobi with different abilities could significantly impact our operations against Millennium. Hinata needs time to recover, Naruto cautioned. The Byakugan draws heavily on its user's chakra reserves, and the dimensional transit has depleted hers severely. Understood. However, once she's stabilized, I'd like her insight on our tactical situation. Integra's expression remained businesslike, but her tone softened slightly. Family loyalty is commendable, Mr. Uzumaki. It seems we have more in common than initially apparent. As she walked away, Alucard materialized beside Naruto, a habit the shinobi found increasingly irritating. The plot thickens, the vampire observed, his voice a silken purr. A devoted wife crossing dimensions, a child transforming into something beyond human understanding, ancient powers reawakening after generations of dormancy. His grin widened. One might almost call it destiny. Naruto's expression hardened. I don't believe in destiny, Alucard. Only choices and their consequences. An admirable philosophy, the vampire conceded, beginning to dissolve into shadow once more. Though in my considerable experience, the universe rarely consults our beliefs before unfolding its designs. Left alone in the garden, Naruto gazed at the scorched earth where the dimensional rift had closed. Hinata's arrival confirmed his worst fears. Sarada's condition was deteriorating faster than anticipated. Whatever answers this world held about the vampiric origins of the Sharingan, he needed to find them quickly. The rising sun cast long shadows across the immaculate grounds of Hellsing Manor, a new day in a world at war, where ancient blood and modern conflict intertwined in ways he was only beginning to understand. Seras Victoria had been assigned to assist Naruto, a transparent euphemism for keeping watch over the dimensional visitor. She fulfilled her duty with earnest professionalism, though her natural curiosity frequently overcame her training. 3 days after Hinata's arrival, Seras found herself sitting cross-legged on the manor's back lawn, watching in fascination as Naruto demonstrated basic chakra manipulation techniques. "So everyone in your world can do this?" she asked, azure eyes wide as a leaf balanced on Naruto's palm split perfectly down the middle without him physically touching it. "With proper training, yes, though aptitude varies greatly," he explained, handing her an identical leaf. Chakra is the combination of physical and spiritual energy. Most people can learn to access it, but bloodline abilities like the Sharingan or Byakugan enhance how effectively it can be controlled. Seras accepted the leaf hesitantly. "I doubt I could do anything like that. I'm still learning to control my vampire abilities." "Actually," Naruto countered, "your vampiric nature might make you more receptive to chakra manipulation, not less. Both involve directing energy through intention and visualization." He guided her through the basic meditation stance he'd learned as an academy student, a lifetime ago, it seemed. Seras closed her eyes, following his instructions, to focus on the sensation of energy flowing through her body. "I feel something," she murmured after several minutes of concentration. "Not bloodthirst, but a tingling, like static electricity under my skin." "That's it," Naruto encouraged. "Now imagine that energy extending beyond your fingertips to the leaf. Visualize it splitting cleanly down the center vein." To Seras's astonishment, the leaf twitched in her palm, a hairline crack appearing along its center. "I did it," she exclaimed, then frowned as the leaf crumbled to dust. "Well, sort of. Impressive for a first attempt," Naruto assured her. "Your energy is different from chakra, more potent in some ways, less structured in others. With practice, you could develop techniques uniquely suited to your nature." This spontaneous training session exemplified how their relationship had evolved over the past days. What had begun as surveillance duty had transformed into genuine cultural exchange. Naruto taught Seras about chakra and ninjutsu. She, in turn, educated him about modern technology and the complexities of Hellsing's operations. "Master Alucard says I'm progressing too slowly," Seras confided as they walked back toward the manor. "That I resist embracing my true nature. There's wisdom in caution when dealing with powers that could overwhelm your humanity," Naruto replied. "Kurama and I spent years finding balance. Rushing the process would have destroyed us both." The mention of Kurama piqued Seras's curiosity. "What's it like, sharing your body with another consciousness? Is it similar to how vampires hear the voices of those they've consumed?" Kurama growled within Naruto's mindscape. "I am no mere meal to be digested, little vampire." Naruto smiled at the fox's indignation. Kurama objects to the comparison. "Our relationship is more like equal partners sharing the same vessel. We maintain separate identities while combining strengths." He glanced at her curiously. "Do vampires truly hear the voices of those whose blood they take?" Seras nodded, discomfort evident in her expression. "Master does. He can call forth the souls of his victims as familiars, manifestations that fight for him. I've only experienced it in dreams so far, whispers from the mercenary whose blood I drank when I was dying." "Another parallel to our world," Naruto observed. "Some shinobi techniques involve summoning creatures or spirits to fight alongside the user. The boundaries between life, death, and spiritual existence blur at the highest levels of power." Their conversation paused as they entered the manor, where preparations for an upcoming operation dominated every available space. Hellsing soldiers calibrated weapons, studied tactical maps, and received briefings from their commanding officers. The atmosphere thrummed with purposeful tension. Walter intercepted them in the main corridor, his customary butler's attire replaced by a more functional uniform that emphasized mobility. "Mr. Uzumaki, Ms. Victoria, Sir Integra requests your presence in the war room immediately. Intelligence has confirmed Millennium activity in Birmingham that requires intervention." Birmingham, England's second largest city. Naruto had learned during his crash course in local geography. A manufacturing center located approximately 2 hours from London by the vehicles of this world. "What kind of activity?" Seras asked. immediately shifting to professional focus. Mass production, Walter replied grimly. Our sources indicate they've established a facility for accelerating creation of artificial vampires using local population as raw material. The operation has been designated Crimson Harvest, and involves personnel from both Hellsing and the local military. Our room buzzed with coordinated chaos when they arrived. Integra stood at the central table, her attention divided between multiple tactical displays showing different aspects of the target facility. Aptane Pip Bernadotte, leader of the Wild Geese mercenaries contracted by Hellsing, gestured animatedly at a structural blueprint while arguing with a military officer in British Army uniform. Cannot wait for full containment protocols. The captain was insisting, his single eye narrowed in frustration. By then, they'll have converted half the bloody city, and charging in half-cocked will result in civilian casualties. Not to mention exposing the existence of vampires to the general public, the officer countered. The Prime Minister has been explicitly clear. Gentlemen, Integra interrupted sharply. Your disagreement is noted. Now be silent. She acknowledged Naruto and Seras with a nod. The situation has accelerated beyond our initial projections. Millennium has established T appears to be a conversion facility in an abandoned manufacturing complex. Local disappearances suggest they've already processed at least 300 victims. Processed? Naruto questioned, studying the facility schematics. Walter provided the grim clarification. Artificial vampires require living hosts implanted with freak chips, the technology you encountered in the financial district. The process involves partial exsanguination, chip implantation, and reanimation through a synthesized vampiric agent. They're building an army, Seras realized. Not just creating random vampires for terror attacks, but systematically manufacturing foot soldiers. Precisely, Integra confirmed, which is why this facility must be neutralized immediately, regardless of political complications. She focused on Naruto. Your wife's condition has stabilized sufficiently for limited field operations. Her visual abilities would provide significant tactical advantage for this mission. Naruto hesitated. Hinata's chakra reserves are still depleted from the dimensional transit. Using the Byakugan would further tax her system. I can manage, came Hinata's voice from the doorway. She entered with quiet dignity. Her Hyuga robes replaced by attire Walter had procured that approximated her usual combat gear. Dark, form-fitting garments that allowed freedom of movement while offering basic protection. My responsibility as a shinobi doesn't end simply because we're in another world. Integra nodded appreciation. Your assistance is valued, Lady Hyuga. The operation commences at nightfall, 3 hours from now. Captain Bernadotte will command the ground forces, with Mr. Uzumaki, Lady Hyuga, and Ms. Victoria serving as our specialized intervention unit. What about Alucard? Seras asked, noting her master's absence. Engaged elsewhere, Integra replied curtly. Millennium's strategy involves multiple simultaneous actions to divide our resources. Alucard is currently neutralizing a situation in Scotland that requires his particular talents. The next hours passed in focused preparation. Naruto and Hinata familiarized themselves with the operation parameters while Seras prepared her weaponry. The plan leveraged each participant's strengths. Hinata's Byakugan would locate hostages and identify the facility's critical systems. Naruto's shadow clones would secure multiple objectives simultaneously. And Seras would provide supernatural firepower to counter the artificial vampires. As twilight approached, the strike team assembled in the manor's courtyard. 4 armored transport vehicles idled, engines rumbling with contained power. The Wild Geese mercenaries checked equipment with professional efficiency, though many cast curious glances toward the dimensional visitors. Captain Bernadotte approached, his distinctive braids swinging as he walked. A lit cigarette dangled from his lips despite regulations against smoking near the vehicles. So, he addressed Naruto and Hinata with casual familiarity. Our dimensional super ninjas. The reports from the financial district were impressive, but this operation will require more than flashy techniques. Captain, Seras admonished, they're experienced combat veterans. No offense intended, Mignonette, Bernadotte assured her with an easy grin. Just establishing expectations. My men follow my orders without question. I need confirmation your friends will do the same. We understand chain of command, Naruto replied diplomatically. In our world, Coordinated operations between different villages require similar clarity of leadership. Apparently satisfied, Bernadotte nodded. Good enough. Wheels up in 5 minutes. Primary objective is facility destruction, secondary is hostage recovery, tertiary is capturing intact examples of their processing technology. He glanced meaningfully at Naruto. Sir Integra mentioned this might provide insights relevant to your personal quest. The journey to Birmingham passed in tense silence. Hinata sat beside Naruto, their fingers intertwined in rare public display of affection. Though they had spoken privately about Sarada's deteriorating condition, this mission marked their first joint operation in this strange world. Your chakra flow has stabilized, Naruto observed quietly. But you're still at less than 60% capacity. Hinata squeezed his hand reassuringly. Enough for what's needed. The Byakugan requires precision more than raw power. Her expression softened with concern. It's you I worry about, Naruto-kun. You've been pushing yourself relentlessly since I arrived. I'm fine, he assured her, though the fatigue of constant adaptation to this world's challenges had indeed begun to wear on him. Kurama's regenerative abilities compensate for the physical strain. To a point, the Nine Tails cautioned within him. Even my chakra has limits in this foreign reality. The dimensional barriers affect how efficiently our energies integrate. Their conversation ended as the transport slowed, approaching the operations staging area, an abandoned shipping yard adjacent to the target facility. Through gaps in the vehicle's armor plating, Naruto glimpsed a sprawling industrial complex. Decaying brick buildings, skeletal metal frameworks, and towering smokestacks silhouetted against the night sky. Charming locale, Bernadotte commented as they disembarked. Intelligence reports minimal external security. They're relying on isolation and bureaucratic camouflage rather than active defenses. They're wrong, Hinata stated with quiet certainty. Her hands formed a familiar seal as veins bulged around her eyes, the Byakugan activating impulses of chakra visible only to Naruto. Byakugan. Her enhanced vision penetrated the facility's walls, revealing details no conventional surveillance could detect. 3 concentric security perimeters. Outer ring consists of standard artificial vampires, 37 total, patrolling in irregular patterns. Second ring has automated weapons systems, infrared targeting, high-caliber rounds. Inner ring surrounds the processing center. She frowned, concentration intensifying. Something's blocking my vision there, a barrier similar to chakra shielding but composed differently. Magical wards, Seras translated for Bernadotte's benefit. Millennium employs occultists alongside their scientists. Hinata continued her assessment. Lower levels contain approximately 200 human captives in various stages of processing. Eastern wing houses completed artificial vampires in stasis, at least 100 units. Command center located centrally, staffed by 7 individuals whose energy signatures differ from the standard artificial vampires. The Comprehe NSIVE intelligence left Bernadotte momentarily speechless before he recovered his professional demeanor. Right, change of plans, then. He quickly revised the assault strategy based on Hinata's observations, dividing his forces to address the multiple security layers simultaneously. Lady Hyuga, you'll coordinate from this position, providing real-time intelligence through our communication system. Uzumaki, you'll lead the main assault team directly to the processing center. Your clones can handle multiple objectives simultaneously. Victoria, you're our heavy artillery. When we identify the central control systems, you'll destroy them with the Harkonnen. The operation commenced with practiced precision. Naruto created 30 shadow clones, each assigned to specific objectives: hostage location, security neutralization, data recovery. The original Naruto, alongside Bernadotte and his elite squad, penetrated the facility's outer perimeter using suppressed weapons and chakra-enhanced stealth. The artificial vampires guarding the complex moved with the jerky efficiency Naruto had observed in previous encounters, powerful but lacking the fluid grace of natural vampires like Alucard. Sharingan analyzed their movement patterns, identifying the rhythmic gaps in their surveillance that allowed the infiltration team to advance undetected. First objective reached, Naruto reported, via the communication device attached to his collar. Exterior security neutralized. Confirmed, came Hinata's voice, her Byakugan tracking all movements within the complex. Bernadotte team, be ad. Vist. Automated systems activating in your sector. Pattern suggests remote triggering. They know you're there. Gunfire erupted from concealed emplacements, forcing the mercenaries to take cover behind industrial equipment. Naruto formed hand seals in rapid succession. Earth-style. Mud wall. The ground before them erupted upward, chakra-infused soil hardening instantly into a protective barrier that absorbed the incoming fire. Bernadotte's expression registered momentary shock before professional appreciation took its place. Handy trick, that, the mercenary captain commented, directing his men to new positions. Can you get us past the auto turrets? Naruto nodded, forming a familiar cross-shaped seal. 5 shadow clones materialized, each carrying paper tags inscribed with sealing formulas. Distraction in 3, 2, 1. The clones charged different sections of the defensive perimeter, drawing fire from the automated weapons. Meanwhile, Naruto pressed his palm against the mud wall he'd created, channeling chakra through the structure. Earth-style. Moving earth core. The hardened soil flowed like liquid, creating a tunnel beneath the automated defenses. Bernadotte signaled his team forward, and they proceeded through the unexpected passage, emerging beyond the second security perimeter. Hinata, status update, Naruto requested as they regrouped. Processing center has increased activity. She reported, her voice tight with concern. They're accelerating the conversion procedures. Hostages in the lower levels are being moved toward the central chamber. They're destroying evidence, Bernadotte concluded grimly, preparing to scorch earth rather than risk capture. Naruto's expression hardened. Not if we reach them first. He created another wave of shadow clones, 20 this time, each equipped with explosive tags. These will create simultaneous breaches throughout the facility. When they detonate, we'll use the confusion to reach the central chamber. The plan executed flawlessly. Coordinated explosions rocked the complex, disabling security systems and creating diversionary chaos. Naruto led Bernadotte's team through the most direct route to the processing center, encountering increasingly organized resistance as they penetrated deeper. The inner sanctum lay behind massive steel doors marked with occult symbols that glowed with eldritch energy. Naruto's Sharingan analyzed the barrier, recognizing principles similar to sealing techniques from his world, though implemented through different metaphysical frameworks. Stand back, he instructed the mercenaries. This barrier uses blood-based activation. Trying to breach it conventionally will trigger lethal countermeasures. So how do we get through? Bernadotte demanded. In answer, Naruto bit his thumb, drawing blood, and traced counter seals directly onto the glowing symbols. By speaking their language, the barrier's glow intensified momentarily before fading entirely, the massive doors swinging open of their own accord. The chamber beyond defied easy description. Clinical sterility merged with ritualistic elements, modern medical equipment arranged in patterns T. Hat formed occult geometries across the floor. At the center stood 7 conversion stations, each currently occupied by a struggling human connected to machinery that systematically drained their blood while preparing implantation devices. Overseeing this grotesque process stood a figure whose appearance immediately registered as different from the standard Millennium operatives. Tall, slender, with platinum blonde hair and wire-rimmed glasses, he wore a white lab coat over a military uniform adorned with SS insignia. DOK, Bernadotte identified their target. Millennium's chief scientist, ND architect of the artificial vampire program. The scientist turned at their entrance, his expression registering neither surprise nor concern, only clinical interest. Fascinating, he commented in accented English. Hellsing's response time continues to improve. And you've brought your new asset, the dimensional anomaly our sensors detected. Naruto stepped forward, Sharingan active and chakra gathering for combat. Release the hostages and surrender the facility. DOK adjusted his glasses with meticulous precision. I think not. This installation has already fulfilled its primary purpose. Data collection rather than mere production. He gestured toward the captives in the conversion stations. These specimens represent the final phase of our experimental process. The Major will be most interested in the results. He means they're not trying to mass-produce vampires here, Bernadotte translated grimly. This is a research facility, not just a factory. Doc's thin smile confirmed the assessment. Indeed. And you, Anomaly, he addressed Naruto directly, have provided the most interesting variable. Our sensors detected your energy signature during the financial district encounter, completely different from standard human or vampiric patterns. The Major authorized this entire operation specifically to lure you into engagement. The implications sent a chill through Naruto. You're experimenting with interdimensional energy. Among other innovations, DOK confirmed, pressing a control on the console before him. The conversion stations activated simultaneously, their CCU pants convulsing as whatever process had been interrupted now accelerated to completion. Naruto moved instantly, creating shadow clones to reach each station while the original engaged DOK directly. The scientist displayed unexpected agility, evading Naruto's initial strike with practiced ease. Military training complementing scientific expertise, Naruto assessed, adjusting his approach. Your observational skills are impressive, DOK acknowledged, producing a modified handgun from his coat. As are your abilities. The Major will be quite pleased when I deliver detailed analysis of your combat parameters. The gun fired not bullets but darts containing a luminous blue substance. Naruto dodged effortlessly, his Sharingan tracking the projectile's trajectory. One grazed Bernadotte's arm as the mercenary captain provided covering fire, the substance sizzling where it contacted his uniform. Poison, Naruto questioned, forming hand seals for a win technique. Data collection, DOK corrected, firing another volley. Each projectile contains nanoscale sensors designed to infiltrate the subject's biological systems and transmit information about their internal energy patterns. Wind style. Vacuum wave. The compressed air technique neutralized the incoming projectiles while forcing DOK back against his console. Meanwhile, Naruto's shadow clones worked frantically to disable the conversion stations. Their medical ninjutsu knowledge proving partially effective against Millennium's twisted technology. 4 stations neutralized, reported 1 clone. Subject stabilized but critical. Remaining stations locked in accelerated cycle, another clone warned. Cannot override. The 3 captives in those stations underwent horrific transformation, their bodies contour. Ting's implanted chips integrated with their nervous systems, skin blanching to corpse-like pallor, teeth extending into fangs as they screamed in agony. Beautiful, isn't it? DOK commented, genuine appreciation in his voice. The moment of transition from mere human to something greater. Each subject responds uniquely, their fear, pain threshold, and biological resilience creating distinct variations in the final product. There's nothing beautiful about torture, Naruto responded coldly, chakra manifesting around his hand in the spiraling pattern of a Rasengan. Before he could strike, he newly created artificial vampires broke free from their restraints, moving with the unnatural speed characteristic of Millennium's creations. Unlike the standard units Naruto had encountered previously, these displayed greater coordination and purpose, immediately targeting the mercenaries rather than attacking indiscriminately. Enhanced cognitive retention, DOK observed with clinical detachment. Excellent. The modified neural interface is functioning as designed. Bernadotte's men opened fire, specialized ammunition finding their marks but failing to neutralize the threats completely. One artificial vampire reached a mercenary, tearing through his tactical gear with elongated claws before Naruto's shadow clone intercepted, driving a Rasengan through its chest cavity. The creature staggered but didn't fall, the wound regenerating almost instantly. Accelerated healing factor 2, DOK noted, recording observations on a handheld device. Most impressive. Naruto reassessed their tactical situation. The enhanced artificial vampires presented greater threat than anticipated, while DOK continued gathering data rather than attempting escape. Something wasn't right. Hinata, he called into his communication device. What's happening in the rest of the facility? Her response came through static interference. Mass movement in the eastern wing. The stasis units are Octiva. Ting. All 100 artificial vampires mobilizing simultaneously. And something else, a transportation system beneath the facility is powering up. Understanding dawned. This was never about production or research, Naruto realized aloud. It's extraction. They're removing their successful specimens while leaving the failures to cover their retreat. Doc's smile widened slightly. Very perceptive. The Major values efficiency. Why abandon valuable assets when they can serve one final purpose? Bernadotte, Naruto commanded, get your men and the rescued hostages out immediately. This entire facility is a trap. The mercenary captain needed no further explanation, immediately ordering tactical withdrawal while providing covering fire. Meanwhile, Naruto created another wave of shadow clones to escort the survivors while the original confronted Dok directly. "You won't escape," he informed the scientist, golden chakra beginning to emanate from his body as he accessed Kurama's power. "Escape was never the objective for me personally," Dok replied with disturbing serenity. "Data transmission was." He held up his device, showing a completion indicator. "The analysis of your abilities has already been sent to our secure servers. My physical presence is now superfluous." With that declaration, Dok pressed a final control on his console. Alarms blared throughout the facility as automated systems initiated what was unmistakably a self-destruct sequence. Simultaneously, the three enhanced artificial vampires ceased their individual attacks and converged on Naruto, moving with coordinated precision that suggested shared consciousness. "Most fascinating," Dok commented as he calmly injected himself with a syringe containing dark fluid. "The Major sends his regards and looks forward to further analysis of your capabilities." The scientist's body began to dissolve, not into ash like destroyed vampires, but into particles too fine to track, similar to the teleportation techniques of Naruto's world. No time remained for pursuit. The facility's destruction sequence had begun, and the enhanced vampires presented immediate threat to the evacuation. Naruto fully activated his Nine Tails mode, golden chakra enveloping his body as he engaged all three creatures simultaneously. Even with supernatural speed and strength, the artificial vampires couldn't match Naruto's enhanced state. He moved between them like living lightning, Rasengans forming in each hand as he systematically disabled their primary motor functions. Unlike standard artificial vampires, however, these continued fighting even with catastrophic damage, heads reattaching to bodies, severed limbs crawling back to their owners. Their regeneration exceeds normal parameters, Naruto assessed, shifting strategy. Need to destroy them completely at once. He created a shadow clone to maintain pressure on the vampires while the original prepared a more definitive technique. Chakra gathered between his hands, dense and volatile, as he formed the hand seals for a jutsu rarely employed due to its destructive potential. Fire style. Great Fire Annihilation. The technique, one he'd copied from Matter, a Uchiha during the Fourth Great Ninja War, unleashed a conflagration that engulfed the entire chamber, converting the enhanced vampires to ash in seconds. The intense heat triggered secondary explosions in the facility's systems, accelerating the already initiated self-destruct sequence. Primary targets neutralized, Naruto reported into his communication device, racing toward the exit. Facility going critical. Status of evacuation. Quote, "Almost complete," Hinata's voice replied through increasing static. "But something's approaching from the northwest, a singular entity moving at incredible speed." Naruto burst through collapsing corridors, the facility disintegrating around him as chain reaction explosions consumed the structure. He emerged into the night air just as a massive detonation engulfed the central building, the shockwave throwing him forward onto the concrete of the shipping yard. As he regained his footing, a new presence registered on his senses, powerful, focused, and distinctly female. Standing atop a nearby storage container, silhouetted against the flames of the destroyed facility, stood a figure whose stance and uniform identified her as Hellsing rather than Millennium. Short, dark hair framed a face of Japanese ancestry, though her features suggested mixed heritage. She wore a tactical uniform similar to Seras's, though modified with equipment Naruto didn't. She recognized technological components integrated with what appeared to be Ofuda, traditional Japanese spiritual wards. "Uzumaki Naruto," she addressed him in perfect Japanese, her voice carrying clearly despite the chaos surrounding them. "I've been anticipating our meeting." Naruto maintained combat readiness, Sharingan active as he assessed this newcomer. Her chakra signature, or this world's EQ, UI Valent, indicated training beyond standard Hellsing personnel, with rhythms that seemed oddly familiar. "You have me at a disadvantage," he replied in the same language. A slight smile curved her lips. "Takagi Yumiko, Hellsing Special Operations Division, Eastern Occult Section." She jumped down from her perch, landing with grace that spoke of extensive martial training. Sir Integra sent me to provide additional support. Though it seems you've managed admirably without it. You're Japanese, Naruto observed, noting details his Sharingan revealed, calluses on her hands consistent with sword training. Subtle movements suggesting familiarity with stealth techniques similar to those employed by shinobi. Half, she corrected. My mother was British, my father Japanese. I was raised in both traditions. Her gaze sharpened with professional assessment. Your chakra flow is unlike anything in our records, though certain patterns resemble techniques documented in my family's scrolls. His revelation immediately captured Naruto's attention. Your family has records of chakra techniques. Before she could answer, Bernadotte approached, his uniform singed and face smudged with soot but otherwise unharmed. Extraction complete. All surviving hostages secured and prepped for medical transport. He nodded acknowledgement to Yumiko. Takagi. Didn't know you were assigned to this operation. Direct intervention from Sir Integra, given the facility's proximity to the Birmingham Shrine, Yumiko explained cryptically. My section has monitored this area since anomalous energy signatures were detected 3 weeks ago. Hinata joined them, her Byakugan deactivated to conserve chakra but her posture alert. She studied Yumiko with quiet intensity before addressing Naruto. Her GY pathways show training similar to our world's chakra circulation techniques, though implemented differently. Yumiko's eyes widened fractionally, the only indication of surprise in her otherwise composed demeanor. You can see internal energy structures. Fascinating. The reports mentioned your visual abilities but not their specific parameters. Hinata Hyuga, Naruto introduced his wife formally. Head of the Hyuga clan and master of the Byakugan. Understanding dawned in Yumiko's expression. Of course, the white eyes of the all-seeing. My family's records mention them alongside the crimson wheel eyes. She bowed with traditional respect. It is an honor, Hyuga-sama. This exchange was interrupted by the arrival of Seras, who emerged from the perimeter security operation looking distinctly nonplussed. The last artificial vampires have been neutralized, but we found something strange in their communication equipment. She held up a device similar to the one DOK had used. Air transmitting data not just to Millennium headquarters but to a secondary location, somewhere in Japan. Yumiko's expression darkened. The Kyoto branch. We've suspected Millennium established operations there, but this confirms it. She turned to Naruto with newfound urgency. Uzumaki-san, the connection between your world and ours may be more direct than anyone realized. My family has Maintai, Ned records of dimensional anomalies for 15 generations, incidents where individuals with abilities similar to yours appeared briefly before vanishing again. Like the scroll I found in the Uchiha Shrine, Naruto murmured. Pieces beginning to connect. It mentioned gates between worlds that opened at specific locations during celestial alignments. Exactly, Yumiko confirmed. And one CH alignment occurs in 6 weeks. The first in nearly a century. She glanced meaningfully at the destroyed facility behind them. Millennium's sudden interest in Birmingham wasn't coincidental. This region contains one of the potential gate locations mentioned in ancient records. The implications crystallized in Naruto's mind. They detected my arrival and are researching interdimensional transit. But why? What would Millennium want with access to the shinobi world? New territory for conquest, Bernadotte suggested grimly. Or worse, new populations to convert into artificial vampires on a scale impossible in our closely monitored world. Hinata's expression reflected horror at the possibility. Konoha, the villages, they would have no defense against threats they've never encountered. We need to return to Hellsing Manor immediately, Naruto decided. This information changes everything. As emergency vehicles converged on the destroyed facility and Hellsing personnel established containment protocols, Naruto found himself walking alongside Yumiko toward the extraction point. The Hellsing operative studied him with undisguised professional interest. The chakra techniques you employed against the artificial vampires, she observed. They follow principles described in my family's oldest scrolls, yet implement them in ways we never imagined possible. Your family maintained knowledge of chakra in this world? Naruto questioned, intrigued by the possibility of connection between their dimensions beyond the Sharingan. Not active usage, but theoretical understanding, yes. Yumiko's expression combined scholarly fascination with martial pragmatism. My ancestors were what you might call spiritualist warriors, mystics who fought supernatural threats through combining Eastern and Western techniques. Their scrolls described entities from another world who manipulated life energy through hand signs and mental discipline. Shinobi who crossed dimensions before, Naruto concluded. Just as the Sharingan did. Yumiko nodded. I've spent years studying those records, attempting to replicate the described techniques with limited success. Until seeing you in action, I'd assumed the accounts were partially allegorical. Her gaze held unmistakable determination. I would be honored if you would consider sharing knowledge. Your techniques could revolutionize how we combat supernatural threats. Quote. Before Naruto could respond, Seras joined them, having overheard the final part of their conversation. That would be brilliant. Naruto's been helping me understand how to better control my vampiric abilities by applying chakra principles. It's made a real difference. Yumiko's eyebrows rose with interest. You've been training Seras. Alucard permitted this. He hasn't forbidden it. Seras clarified with a slight flush. Though he finds it amusing more than anything. I'd be happy to share what knowledge might be useful, Naruto agreed as they reached the transport vehicles. Though my primary focus remains understanding the connection between the Sharingan and vampiric abilities. Then my family's records may prove invaluable, Yumiko replied with quiet confidence. They contain specific references to the Crimson Wheel Eyes and their connection to what we call blood manipulation arts, techniques that control life essence through visual domination. As they boarded the transport, Naruto felt cautious optimism for the first time since arriving in this world. Between Hellsing's resources, Yumiko's family records, and the captured Millennium data, answers about the Sharingan's vampiric origins seemed within reach. Yet darker implications loomed. Millennium's interest in interdimensional travel presented a threat not just to this world but potentially to his own. The 3-month deadline for Sarada's condition suddenly seemed complicated by larger concerns that might affect both realities. The journey back to Hellsing Manor asked in tactical discussion and planning, with Yumiko providing insights that bridged Eastern and Western approaches to supernatural threats. Her presence added a new dimension to their alliance, one who understood both worlds in ways neither Hellsing nor the shinobi could individually. As dawn broke over the English countryside, Naruto found himself contemplating the expanding complexity of their situation. What had begun as a personal quest to save one child now intersected with a multidimensional conflict whose full scope remained unclear. The blood and chakra of two worlds had begun to mingle once more, just as they had in ancient times when the Sharingan first crossed between realities. Whether this renewed connection would bring salvation or destruction remained to be seen. PTER 2 End Chapter 3, The Crimson Inheritance. Dawn light filtered through leaded glass windows, casting prismatic patterns across ancient texts spread carefully on the polished oak table. Naruto sat, cross-legged on a cushion he'd placed on the floor of Hellsing Manor's archive room, his posture reflecting meditative stillness while his mind raced through connections and possibilities. Across from him, Yumiko Takagi mirrored his position, her family scrolls unrolled between them, delicate rice paper covered in calligraphy that blended Japanese characters with symbols Naruto recognized from his own world's sealing techniques. The alignment is unmistakable, Yumiko observed, her finger tracing a complex diagram that depicted energy flows between concentric circles. What your world calls chakra pathways. My ancestors documented as spirit channels. The terminology differs, but the underlying principles are identical. Naruto nodded, his Sharingan active to memorize the texts perfectly. The hand signs are simplified but recognizable. Your family preserved the core sequence for elemental manipulation, though some of the transitional forms are missing. A week had passed since the Birmingham operation. Days spent in intensive research and information exchange. Yumiko had proven an invaluable collaborator, her family's 15 generations of occult knowledge bridging gaps in understanding between shinobi techniques and this world's supernatural phenomena. My great-grandfather documented his encounter with what he called a shadow walker, Yumiko continued, unrolling another scroll with reverent care. A visitor who appeared during the cherry blossom viewing of 1887, demonstrated impossible abilities including walking on water and breathing fire, then vanished 3 days later. The family believed him delusional until he produced this. She extracted a protective sleeve containing a single leaf, perfectly preserved, yet unmistakably unlike any botanical specimen native to Earth. Its structure resembled an oak, but the distinctive chakra signature visible to Naruto's enhanced perception confirmed its otherworldly origin. From the Forest of Death, Naruto identified immediately. A species unique to the training grounds of Konoha. Your ancestor encountered a shinobi during a previous dimensional crossing. The first documented in my family's records, but not the last, Yumiko confirmed. 17 incidents across 3 centuries, each coinciding with specific celestial alignments. Some visitors arrived purposefully, others by apparent accident. None remained longer than a lunar cycle. Except me, Naruto noted. And now Hinata. Yumiko's expression grew contemplative, which suggests either the dimensional barrier has weakened, or your method of crossing differs fundamentally from previous instances. Their academic discussion was interrupted as the archive door opened to admit Walter, carrying a silver tray with tea and light refreshments. The butler's perpetually composed demeanor showed subtle signs of fatigue. The past week had stretched Hellsing's resources to their limits as Millennium's attacks continued throughout Britain. IR Integra requests your presence in the tactical chamber, Walter announced, setting down the tray. Miss Victoria has returned from her reconnaissance mission with information pertinent to your research. Naruto rose fluidly, gathering the most relevant scrolls. Has Hinata returned as well? Lady Hyuga's team is expected within the hour, Walter replied. Their operation in Dover apparently yielded significant intelligence. The 3 proceeded through Hellsing Manor's labyrinthine corridors, the morning quiet punctuated only by the distant sounds of personnel conducting routine operations. Despite a week of intensive activity, the organization maintained precise functionality, a testament to Integra's leadership. The tactical chamber differed from the larger war room, designed for smaller strategy sessions rather than full operational coordination. Integra stood before a wall-mounted display showing satellite imagery of what appeared to be a mountainous region in Central Europe. Beside her, Seras Victoria looked uncharacteristically disheveled, her uniform bearing evidence of recent combat. Uzumaki, Takagi, Integra acknowledged their arrival without turning. Victoria Ha's confirmed our suspicions regarding Millennium's interest in dimensional research. Seras straightened at their entrance, professional demeanor overcoming her evident fatigue. The intelligence from Birmingham led us to a secondary facility in the Austrian Alps. Small operation, primarily research rather than production. She activated a handheld device, projecting images onto a secondary display, laboratory equipment. Occult symbols etched into metal frameworks, and what appeared to be attempts to recreate the dimensional transit ritual Naruto had used. They're trying to reverse engineer your arrival, Seras explained. Using energy signatures recorded when you first appeared and again when Lady Hyuga crossed over. They've created devices to detect and amplify interdimensional disturbances. With limited success. Judging by the damage patterns, Yumiko observed, studying the images with practiced analysis. These burn marks indicate catastrophic energy feedback. They attempted activation but couldn't stabilize the dimensional aperture. Precisely, Seras confirmed. According to documents I recovered, they've had 17 failed attempts, each destroying their equipment and, in 3 cases, the researchers themselves. Naruto frowned, examining the ritual configurations displayed in the images. They're approaching it wrong, treating the dimensional barrier as a physical obstacle to be breached by force rather than a boundary to be navigated. The jutsu I used works with the natural fluctuations between worlds, finding existing points of convergence rather than creating artificial ones. Which explains why their brute force approach results in destructive feedback, Yumiko concluded. Like trying to break through a door instead of finding the key. Their persistence suggests this research holds particular significance for their overall strategy, Integra noted, finally turning to face them fully. The Major has diverted considerable resources to this project despite repeated failures. Because access to our world would provide them unlimited expansion potential, Naruto reasoned, recalling Bernadotte's assessment from Birmingham. A dimension unprepared for vampiric threats. With population centers unprotected by organizations like Hellsing. There's more, Seras interjected, her expression darkening. They're specifically interested in chakra as an alternative power source for their artificial vampires. The documents reference transcendent integration potential and evolutionary acceleration through dimensional energy harvesting. The implications chilled Naruto to his core. They want to create hybrids, beings with both vampiric abilities and chakra manipulation. The captain in the financial district, Yumiko realized. A prototype, perhaps. Werewolf essence merged with cybernetics suggests they're already experimenting with integrating different supernatural systems. Integra's expression remained impassive, though her yes narrowed slightly, the only indication of concern she permitted herself. This escalates our timetable considerably. If Millennium achieves stable dimensional transit before we've neutralized their leadership, both worlds face unprecedented threat, Naruto finished grimly. We need to understand exactly how the original connection between our dimensions formed. It might reveal how to prevent Millennium from establishing their own crossing. Which brings us to Victoria's most significant discovery. Integra gestured for Seras to continue. The young vampire produced a small metal case, opening it to reveal what appeared to be an ancient manuscript preserved in specialized containment. This was in their most secure vault, a journal written in 1547 by someone called Matthias Cronquist. It documents early experiments in what he termed blood alchemy, including attempts to capture and transfer specific supernatural abilities through blood consumption. Cronquist, Walter interjected with scholarly precision. A nobleman rumored to have dabbled in forbidden arts before disappearing from historical record. Some occult texts suggest he later re-emerged under a different identity. The journal contains specific references to crimson wheel eyes encountered during an alchemical trance, Seras continued, her voice carrying professional detachment despite the extraordinary nature of her report. Cronquist describes visions of beings from another world with eyes that spun like windmills and commanded absolute fealty from those who gazed upon them. Naruto exchanged meaningful glances with Yumiko. The Sharingan, he somehow perceived it across dimensional boundaries. Not just perceived, Seras corrected, carefully turning to a specific page protected by transparent preservation film. He claimed to have found a method to draw essence across the veil between worlds, a ritual combining blood sacrifice, celestial alignment, and what he called sympathetic resonance. Between identical powers in disparate realms. The page displayed intricate diagrams that bore unmistakable similarities to both the ancient Uchiha scroll Naruto had discovered and certain sections of Yumiko's family records. At the center of the illustration, rendered in what appeared to be blood rather than ink, was a perfect representation of a three-tomo Sharingan. This is it, Naruto breathed, leaning closer to study the text. The original connection. Not natural dimensional thinning but a deliberate ritual to extract power from my world into this one. Which means, Yumiko added, her scholarly demeanor giving way to excitement, the connection could be reconstructed under similar conditions, controlled, directed, and potentially closed if necessary. Their analysis was erupted as the tactical chamber's door opened to admit Hinata, accompanied by Captain Bernadotte. Unlike Seras, Hinata appeared composed despite having just returned from field operations, her Hyuga Tr. Aining evident in her impeccable posture and serene expression. Only Naruto, intimately familiar with his wife's subtlest cues, noticed the slight tension around her eyes that indicated intensive Byakugan usage. Excellent timing, Integra acknowledged. Lady Hyuga, please brief us on your findings. Hinata bowed slightly, a cultural gesture she maintained even in this foreign world, before chivating a data device similar to Seras's. The Dover operation confirmed Millennium activity along ley lines corresponding to those documented in Takagi-san's family scrolls. They've established touring stations at 17 locations across Britain, each situated at points where dimensional barriers show historical thinning. The display changed to show a map with the locations marked in red, forming a pattern that even to untrained eyes appeared deliberate rather than random. They're creating a ritual array, Yumiko identified immediately. Similar to principles used in Myoto, Japanese esoteric cosmology. By establishing measurement points along natural energy currents, they can potentially map dimensional weak points with precision impossible through isolated observation. The aligns with documentation from the Alpine facility, Seras added. They're compiling data from all 17 stations into a predictive model for dimensional breach attempts. Bernadotte leaned against the wall, his practical military mind cutting through the esoteric discussion. Bottom line, how close are they to success, and what do we do about it? Their current approach remains fundamentally flawed, Naruto assessed. Without understanding the chakra principles involved in dimensional navigation, they'll continue experiencing catastrophic failures. However, he hesitated, considering implications that had been forming in his mind throughout the discussion. However, Integra prompted, her tone making clear she expected complete candor. The Conquest Journal suggests an alternative approach they might discover. Naruto continued, if they realize the connection can be established through sympathetic resonance, rather than forced breach, using similar powers on both sides the dimensional barrier as anchors, they might bypass the limitations of purely technological methods. Which means they need someone with powers that exist in both dimensions, Hinata concluded, perceptiveness matching Naruto's thought process. Like the Sharingan, or someone who carries it. A heavy silence settled over the room as implications crystallized. Millennium's interest in Naruto wasn't merely academic curiosity about an interdimensional visitor, he represented a potential key to stable crossing between worlds. We must assume they've reached the same conclusion, Integra stated decisively. Which makes your protection an operational priority, Uzumaki. Naruto shook his head, I appreciate the concern, but I'm not the only potential vector. Sarada Uchiha, the child whose condition prompted my journey here, she carries naturally inherited Sharingan. If Millennium established even temporary dimensional access, they could potentially sense her power and target her instead. Or any Sharingan user throughout your world's history, Yumiko added gravely. The Conquest Journal suggests the initial connection occurred centuries ago in our timeline, which means similar tools might have been attempted repeatedly. Which brings us to the most pressing question, Walter interjected with Butler's precision. If the original transfer of Sharingan essence into our world created vampiric abilities as we know them, what would the reverse process create? What happens when vampiric essence flows into your world? Sarada's condition may already provide that answer, Hinata said softly. The merging of her natural Sharingan inheritance with what appears to be reactivated vampiric essence. Her symptoms, bloodthirst, shadow manipulation, dream manifestation, they're higher abilities expressing through chakra pathways rather than this world's biological systems. The tactical implications expanded exponentially with each new connection they established. What had begun as a personal quest to help one child had evolved into understanding an interdimensional power exchange with centuries of historical precedent and potentially catastrophic future consequences. We need more information, Integra decided, her tone indicating shift from analysis to action. Takagi, continue cross-referencing your family records with the Conquest Journal. Uzumaki, work with Lad. Y. Hyuga to document everything about this Sarada's condition in clinical detail. Her progression may provide crucial insights into how powers transfer between dimensions. She turned to Seras and Bernadotte. Captain, reinforce security protocols at the identified ley line intersections within our operational territory. Victoria, I have a different assignment for you. Her expression softened finally, a change so subtle only those who knew her well would notice. You've been working with Uzumaki on controlling your abilities through chakra principles. I want detailed documentation of those Essions, how shinobi techniques affect vampiric essence. The meeting concluded with assigned objectives, each participant departing with clear purpose, except Naruto, whom Integra asked to remain with a subtle gesture. When they were alone in the tactical chamber, she activated additional security protocols, sealing the room against both conventional and supernatural surveillance. There's something I've withheld from general briefing, she admitted, removing her glasses to pinch the bridge of her nose, a rare display of fatigue. Alucard has been investigating historical connections between the Empire legends and references to beings with abilities similar to your Sharingan. His findings suggest something more troubling than mere power transfer between dimensions. Naruto maintained respectful silence, allowing her to continue at her own pace. He believes the original transfer was bidirectional, that while the Sharingan essence entered our world to create the first true vampires, Summit Hing from our world entered yours simultaneously. A balancing of cosmic scales, if you will. That aligns with certain Uchiha clan records, Naruto acknowledged. References to their founder making a pact with entities beyond the veil, to obtain power, beyond mortal constraint. Then you understand the implication, Integra stated rather than asked. If Millennium succeeds in establishing stable dimensional transit, they won't merely export their artificial vampires to your world, they'll potentially reactivate whatever dark exchange occurred centuries ago, accelerating transformations like Serata's on a massive scale. The gravity of this possibility settled between them like a physical weight. Naruto considered carefully before responding. There's something I haven't shared either, he admitted. When I first activated Sasuke's Sharingan after the transplant, I experienced visions. Memories not my own, nor Sasuke's, something deeper, ancestral perhaps. Glimpses of a ritual, performed by someone with eyes already transformed into the Mangekyo, standing before what appeared to be a dimensional rift similar to the one that brought me here. The original exchange, Integra surmised, witnessed through blood memory preserved in the Sharingan itself. Possibly. The vision was fragmented, but one detail remained clear: the ritual required blood sacrifice on both sides of the dimensional barrier. Willing sacrifice, not taken by force. Integra absorbed this information with characteristic composure. Then cooperation between our worlds isn't merely advantageous, it's essential to understanding and potentially controlling whatever process began centuries ago. She replaced her glasses, her moment of vulnerability concealed once more behind professional detachment. Work with Victoria this afternoon as planned. Her progress with chakra principles may provide practical insights beyond theoretical analysis. With that dismissal, Naruto departed the tactical chamber, mind racing with implications both historical and immediate. The connection between Sharingan and vampiric abilities extended beyond mere similarity. They were divergent expressions of the same fundamental power, shaped by the distinct metaphysical properties of two separate dimensions. Which meant Serata's condition wasn't simply a medical anomaly but the natural consequence of powers returning to their original integrated state. Understanding how to help her control these emerging abilities required comprehending not just the separation of these powers but their intended unified form. The path forward had become simultaneously clearer and more complex, a paradox Naruto contemplated as he made his way to the training grounds where Seras awaited their scheduled session. Hellsing. Manor's eastern grounds had been converted to a training area following Naruto and Hinata's arrival, the manicured gardens giving way to reinforced target ranges and combat circles reminiscent of shinobi training fields. Seras waited at the central practice area, her massive Harkonnen cannon set aside in favor of standard firearms more appropriate for precision exercises. "There you are," she greeted as Naruto approached. "I was beginning to think you'd been pulled into another emergency briefing." "Just additional discussion with Integra," he replied, noting how Seras's posture had changed. Over the weeks of training, more balanced, her weight distribution reflecting growing awareness of her center of gravity. Small improvements that indicated she was internalizing the body control principles fundamental to chakra manipulation. "Today we're going to try something new," Naruto announced, removing his jacket to reveal mesh armor similar to standard shinobi attire. "You've made excellent progress with basic chakra sensing and circulation. It's time to explore how these principles interact with your vampiric abilities." Seras's expression registered both excitement and apprehension. "Master Alucard says I'm still resisting my true nature, that I haven't fully embraced what I've become." Alucard's perspective comes from centuries as a vampire, Naruto observed diplomatically. "Why? Our journey is different, integration rather than replacement. You're not erasing your humanity to become a vampire, you're expanding your understanding of self to include both aspects." This framing visibly resonated with Seras, tension easing from her shoulders. "That actually makes more sense than anything Master has told me. He keeps expecting me to simply abandon who I was." "Because that was his experience," Naruto suggested. "Complete transformation through rejection of his former self. But there are other paths." He created a shadow clone that stood beside him, perfectly mirroring his appearance and energy signature. "In my world, I had to learn to work with Kurama rather than suppress or be consumed by his power. Neither dominance nor submission, partnership." The shadow clone's eyes shifted to reflect Kurama's vulpine gaze, golden chakra emanating from its form in demonstration. Seras watched with fascination, her own eyes unconsciously shifting toward their vampiric crim. Sun state in response to the powerful energy. Your vampiric abilities respond to certain triggers, blood consumption, emotional states, perceived threats, Naruto continued as his clone returned to normal appearance. Similar to how Jinchuriki initially access their tailed beast's chakra through heightened emotion or danger. The key to controlled manifestation lies in understanding these triggers and creating conscious pathways to the same abilities. Like learning to turn a tap rather than waiting for a pipe to burst, Seras analogized. Exactly, Naruto confirmed, pleased by her intuitive grasp. Let's start with something fundamental to both vampire abilities and chakra manipulation, enhanced sensory perception. Over the next 2 hours, they worked through exercises designed to breed DGE conscious control and vampiric instinct. Naruto guided Seras through meditation techniques that helped her identify the distinct sensation of her vampiric powers activating, then methods to initiate those same sensations voluntarily rather than reactively. Progress came in small but significant increments, Seras managing to enhance her visual acuity without fully shifting to vampiric sight, directing her enhanced hearing to specific locations rather than being overwhelmed by all sounds simultaneously, detecting subtle energy patterns that would have previously required full vampiric transformation to perceive. It's like having dimmer switches instead of just on-off buttons, she marveled, eyes closed as she tracked Naruto's shadow clone moving silently around the training ground. I can access different levels of ability without losing myself in the process. That's the foundation of chakra control, Naruto confirmed. Precise application rather than raw output. Now let's try applying this to something more challenging, your physical transformation abilities. Seras's expression immediately tensed. The shadow arm. I've only managed that under extreme duress. Because you've been treating it as something separate from yourself. A last resort rather than an integrated capability. Naruto positioned himself opposite her, Sharingan activating to monitor her energy flows. Close your eyes and recall the sensation when the transformation occurred. Not the external circumstances, but the internal experience, how it felt as the change began. Following his guidance, Seras closed her eyes, expression shifting through concentration to remembrance and finally to understanding. It felt like boundaries dissolving. Not just physical form but the distinction between will and manifestation becoming fluid. That state of fluid boundary between intention and reality is the essence of both advanced chakra techniques and vampiric transformation, Naruto explained. In my world, we use hand signs and visualization to structure this process. For vampires, it appears more instinctual, but the underlying principle remains consistent. He demonstrated by creating a Rasengan. Chakra spiraling visibly between his palms. This technique requires precise visualization, energy rotation, and containment, 3 separate processes maintained simultaneously. Your shadow arm transformation requires similar multidimensional focus. Under Naruto's patient guidance, Seras began working through modified exercises, starting with visualizing the transformation while maintaining conscious awareness. Then initiating minimal physical changes that she could sustain and reverse at will. By the session's conclusion, she had managed to transform her left arm from elbow to fingertips, maintaining the change for nearly 30 seconds before reverting to normal human appearance. She stared at her hand in amazement, I've never been able to control it so precisely before. Excellent progress, Naruto affirmed. With continued practice, his instruction was interrupted by slow, deliberate applause from the edge of the training ground. Alucard materialized from shadow, his characteristic red coat and hat cutting a dramatic figure against the afternoon light. Most impressive, the ancient vampire commented, his tone balanced between genuine appreciation and sardonic amusement. Teaching my fledgling to sip delicately at powers she should be drinking deeply. He approached with measured steps, crimson eyes assessing Naruto with predatory interest. She almost suspect you fear what she'd become if fully embracing her nature. Seras straightened instinctively in her master's presence. The control techniques are helping, master. I can access abilities consciously rather than only in crisis. Indeed, control has its uses. Alucard circled them slowly, his movement reminiscent of a shark considering potential prey. But power restrained as power diminished. The techniques of your world, shinobi, emphasize precision at the expense of primal potential. Different approaches for different purposes, Naruto responded diplomatically, though he maintained alertness in the vampire's presence. Precision allows for sustained application rather than momentary overwhelming force. A philosophy that assumes luxury of time, Alucard countered, stopping directly before Naruto. Yet I wonder, when faced with truly overwhelming threat, do you maintain such measured restraint? Or do you, too, draw upon powers that threaten to consume rather than merely serve? The question struck uncomfortably close to experiences throughout Naruto's life, moments when Kurama's power had overtaken his consciousness, when grief or rage had pushed him beyond controlled chakra application into raw, devastating output. I've experienced both extremes, he acknowledged honestly, and found greater strength in balance than in either control without power or power without control. Something like approval flickered across Alucard's features. A more nuanced answer than expected. His attention shifted to Seras. Continue these lessons, police girl. They have merit, though insufficient alone. To Naruto, he added, when you've finished playing teacher, I would speak with you regarding matters of mutual interest. The rooftop at midnight. Without waiting for response, Alucard dissolved into shadow once more, leaving behind only lingering chill in the air and the faint scent of ancient blood. Seras released a breath she'd apparently been holding. That was, almost approval. From Master. He's never shown interest in my training methods before. He sees potential in your progress, Naruto observed. Though his approach differs, he recognizes advancement regardless of methodology. After a thoughtful pause, he added, let's conclude for today. You've made significant strides. Practice the visualization exercises before our next session. As Seras gathered her equipment, her expression turned curious. Will you meet with him? Master doesn't extend invitations without purpose. I will, Naruto confirmed. Whatever his personal methods, Alucard possesses knowledge about the connection between Sharingan and vampiric abilities that might prove crucial to helping Sarada. After Seras departed, Naruto remained in the training ground, reflecting on the session's progress and Alucard's unexpected appearance. The ancient vampire's interest in their training suggested deeper purpose than mere territorial concern over his fledgling, something connected to the revelations from the Conquest Journal and the emerging understanding of interdimensional power transfer. As afternoon light gave way to evening shadows, Naruto sensed another presence approaching. Not Alucard returning, nor any Hellsing personnel he'd encountered previously. His Sharingan activated automatically as he turned toward the manor's perimeter wall, where a figure observed from concealed position among ancient oak branches. I know you're there, he called calmly, body shifting subtly into combat readiness. Your concealment technique is impressive, but ineffective against these eyes. Silence held for several heartbeats before the observer abandoned pretense, dropping gracefully from the tree to land at the training ground's edge. Female, tall and athletically built, dressed in clothing that blended practical combat functionality with aristocratic styling. Dark riding breeches, tailored jacket reinforced at stress points, boots designed for both horseback and ground movement. Auburn hair framed a face of classical English beauty, though her expression conveyed wary assessment rather than any warmth. Most notably, she carried weapons, not modern firearms like Hellsing's forces, but a cavalry saber at her hip and what appeared to be silver-tipped quarrels in bandoliers across her chest. The small crossbow mechanism mounted on her left vambrace confirmed their purpose. The dimensional anomaly, she addressed him in cultured accent that placed her among Britain's upper classes. With eyes like the devil's own, Naruto maintained non-threat, ending posture despite his combat readiness. I have many names. Dimensional anomaly is among the less personal. You might try Naruto Uzumaki instead. A flicker of surprise crossed her features before composure reasserted itself. You speak the Queen's English with remarkable fluency for someone not of this world. A benefit of the Sharingan, Naruto explained, tapping lightly beside his eye. Perfect recall and pattern recognition make language acquisition relatively straightforward. How convenient. Her hand remained near her saber's hilt, though she made no move to draw the weapon. Lady Elizabeth Winterfield, I represent the Royal Protestant Knights, an organization considerably older than Hellsing and considerably less impressed by their recent security lapses. The name registered from intelligence briefings Naruto had received, one of several supernatural monitoring groups in Britain, this one with direct ties to the monarchy rather than the government that technically oversaw Hellsing's operations. You've been watching the manor, he observed. For how long? Since your arrival created energy disruptions that activated monitoring systems across southern England. Lady Elizabeth replied with clipped precision. Your subsequent excursions with Hellsing forces have been equally noticeable. If you've been observing that long, you know I'm allied with Hellsing against Millennium. Alliances of convenience concern us precisely because they are convenient rather than principled. She studied him with intensity that suggested more than ordinary perception. Your power signature resembles nothing in our considerable archives, save certain readings taken during Alucard's most unrestrained manifestations. That similarity alone warrants investigation. Naruto recognized the subtext of her statement. This was not merely observation but assessment of potential threat. Lady Elizabeth represented an organization that viewed even Hellsing's pet vampire with suspicion. An interdimensional visitor with unknown powers would naturally trigger their protocols. I understand your caution, he acknowledged. In your position, I would have similar concerns. However, entering Hellsing property uninvited suggests something beyond routine monitoring. Hellsing's jurisdiction is granted by the Crown, which the Royal Protestant Knights have served since before the organization's founding. She countered smoothly. We have prerogative to investigate potential threats to the realm, particularly those harbored by agencies with complicated loyalties. The diplomatic implications were clear. Her organization questioned Hellsing's judgment in allying with Naruto without their approval or oversight. Political dynamics in this world apparently rivaled he inter-village complications of the shinobi world. Perhaps we should discuss your concerns directly rather than through implication, Naruto suggested. I have no intention of threatening your realm, Lady Winterfield. My purpose here is specific and limited. Understanding the connection between abilities in my world and yours to help someone suffering from their uncontrolled manifestation. So, nothing in his straightforward approach seemed to register with Elizabeth, her posture relaxing marginally though vigilance remained evident in her eyes. The Royal Protestant Knights possess archives predating Hellsing's founding, she stated after measured consideration, including records of interdimensional incursions throughout British history. Your presence has activated protocols established during the Elizabethan era, specifically addressing entities with red eyes and reality-altering capabilities. This revelation immediately captured Naruto's attention. These protocols, they reference abilities similar to the Sharingan. Not merely similar, Elizabeth replied, her tone shifting toward scholarly precision rather than military assessment. They specifically document an incident in 1580 involving a visitor who could cast illusions, predict movements, and manifest black flames that consumed everything they touched. She studied his reaction carefully. Abilities I observed you demonstrating during the Birmingham operation. The timeline aligned with references in both the Uchiha scrolls and Yumiko's family records, suggesting multiple dimensional crossings occurred during that historical period. Not isolated incidents. These records, Naruto inquired, do they document what happened to the visitor? How they arrived, why they came, whether they returned to their world? Some aspects, yes. Elizabeth's response turned deliberately measured. Which is why I've been authorized to extend conditional cooperation rather than simply eliminating a potential threat. The knowledge we possess may prove relevant to your stated purpose, while your insights might complete gaps in our historical understanding. An exchange of information, Naruto translated. Though your initial approach suggests limited trust in such arrangements. A ghost of a smile touched Elizabeth's lips, the first indication of personality beyond professional reserve. Trust is earned, Mr. Uzumaki, not assumed. My observations confirmed you possess extraordinary abilities but left your intentions ambiguous. This conversation begins the process of clarification. Before Naruto could respond, a new presence made itself known, Hinata approaching from the manor, her expression serene though Naruto recognized the subtle tension in her movement that indicated combat readiness. Naruto-kun, she addressed him in Japanese. Our guest arrived nearly 20 minutes ago. Integra-san is aware of her presence but chose to allow your conversation to proceed uninterrupted. Her Byakugan briefly activated, assessing Elizabeth with comprehensive perception before deactivating again. She carries multiple blessed silver weapons and what appears to be a sealing charm of Western design. Elizabeth H's eyebrows rose fractionally, the only indication of surprise at being so thoroughly assessed in an instant. Your companion's eyes differ from yours, yet appear equally perceptive. My wife, Hinata Hyuga, Naruto introduced formally. Carrier of the Byakugan, another dojutsu from our world with different capabilities than the Sharingan. Two distinct eye powers, Elizabeth noted with scholarly interest. Our records mentioned rumors of white-eyed companions to the red-eyed visitors, though confirmed encounters documented only the latter. Hinata bowed slightly in traditional greeting. Why? Our organization's interest in dimensional visitors suggests knowledge that might help us understand what's happening to Sarada-chan. Elizabeth's expression registered momentary confusion before comprehension dawned. The child you mentioned, the one experiencing uncontrolled manifestation of these powers. She considered briefly before coming to apparent decision. The archives at Winterfield S. Tate contain journals written by Sir Francis Walsingham documenting his interrogation of a red-eyed visitor in 1582. The accounts describe what happened when powers from your world remained too long NRs, a process called dimensional degradation, that transformed abilities in unpredictable ways. This revelation aligned perfectly with their emerging understanding of Sarada's condition, suggesting her symptoms represented not an anomaly but a documented process that had affected previous Sharingan users who crossed dimensions. We need to see those records, Naruto stated, urgency entering his voice for the first time in their conversation. Which is precisely why I've made contact, Elizabeth confirmed. The Royal Protestant Knights have authorized conditional access in exchange for our cooperation with our assessment protocols and full disclosure regarding your dimensional transit methodology. The offer presented both opportunity and complication, potential answers regarding Sarada's condition. But at cost of navigating another organization's political agenda alongside Hellsing's. Before Naruto could formulate response, Hinata provided diplomatic solution with characteristic grace. Perhaps we should continue this discussion with Sir Integra present, she suggested. As our formal alliance is with Hellsing, coordination between organizations would benefit all parties while respecting existing agreements. Elizabeth inclined her head in acknowledgement of the reasonable proposal. A sensible approach, Lady Hyuga. I am authorized to establish preliminary information exchange pending formal cooperation agreements. As they proceeded toward the manor where Integra undoubtedly awaited this development with characteristic composed calculation, Naruto reflected on expanding complexity of their situation. What had begun as a focused quest for understanding the Sharingan's vampiric connections had evolved into navigating intricate political relationships between organizations whose centuries of supernatural conflict management had created elaborate protocols and jurisdictional complexities. Yet within these complications lay potential answers, historical documentation of previous dimensional crossings, records of how Sharingan-like abilities transformed in this world, perhaps even accounts of how visitors returned to their dimension. The path to helping Sarada grew simultaneously more convoluted and more promising with each new revelation. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Hellsing Manor's grounds as they approached the imposing structure. Symbolic of how illumination and obscurity continued to intermingle in their growing understanding of the crimson inheritance that connected two worlds through blood and power. Midnight found Naruto on the manor's highest rooftop. The designated meeting place Alucard had specified. The moon hung full and heavy in the clear autumn sky, casting silver illumination across the estate's extensive grounds. From this vantage point, security patrols were visible as they conducted rounds, Hellsing's vigilance undiminished despite the late hour. The meeting with Integra and Lady Elizabeth had established tentative cooperation between Hellsing and the Royal Protestant Knights, though political undercurrents suggested long-standing tensions between the organizations. Elizabeth would return the following day with selected materials from the Walsingham journals, while Hellsing would share their findings from the Cronquist documentation. Diplomatic necessities addressed, if not entirely resolved. The full moon reveals truths hidden by daylight. Alucard's voice emerged from darkness before his physical form materialized. Unlike his usual flamboyant appearance, the ancient vampire now wore simpler attire reminiscent of his original historical period, suggesting this meeting held significance beyond casual conversation. That depends on who's looking, Naruto replied, turning to face him. The Sharingan sees equally well regardless of illumination. But perception extends beyond mere visual acuity. Alucard approached to stand beside him at the roof's edge, crimson gaze scanning the moonlit landscape. Under the full moon, the boundaries between worlds thin, not enough for crossing, but sufficient for clearer perception of connections normally obscured. Naruto remained silent, allowing Alucard to proceed at his own pace. Experience had taught him the vampire's theatrical tendencies often concealed genuine insights worth the performance required to obtain them. "You've been researching the connection between Sharingan and vampiric abilities," Alucard continued, approaching from scholarly perspective, texts, historical accounts, theoretical frameworks. "Commendable, but incomplete." His gaze shifted to meet Naruto's directly. "Some knowledge can only be obtained through experience rather than observation. What are you suggesting?" "A direct experiment," Alucard proposed, his usual sardonic tone replaced by something approaching scientific curiosity. "Your Sharingan allows you to perceive and copy techniques observed. My vampiric abilities include similar perceptive and adaptive capabilities. Under moonlight that thins dimensional barriers, a controlled exchange might reveal connections invisible to conventional research." The proposal carried both intriguing potential and obvious risk. Alucard's abilities stemmed from centuries of evolution as a vampire, while Naruto's represented the integration of Kurama's power with transplanted Sharingan. Dire court interaction between such fundamentally different yet conceptually related powers could yield unprecedented insights or catastrophic consequences. What form would this experiment take? Naruto inquired, neither accepting nor rejecting the proposal outright. Alucard's expression shifted to one of approval at the measured response. "Combat without killing intent. Controlled application of Escala. Ting abilities while both maintain analytical awareness. My familiars against your shadow clones, my regeneration against your healing factor, my hypnotic influence against your genjutsu." The structured comparison made methodical sense, though Naruto recognized inherent dangers. "And if the interaction produces unexpected results, then we learn something even more valuable than anticipated." Alucard replied with characteristic embrace of potential chaos. "Integra has been informed of this proposal and has authorized a specialized training ground beyond the manor's eastern perimeter, sufficiently isolated to contain any energetic outcomes." The careful preparation suggested this experiment held more significance than Alucard's casual proposal implied, perhaps connecting to the bi-directional transfer Integra had mentioned earlier that day. Naruto considered carefully, weighing potential knowledge gained against risks involved. "Very well," he agreed finally. "Though we should establish safety parameters, specific conditions under which we immediately terminate the experiment." "Prudent," Alucard acknowledged, something like respect briefly visible behind his usual predatory amusement. "Integra has designated Walter to monitor from safe distance with authorization to intervene through specialized countermeasures should either of us lose control." They departed the rooftop together, traversing the darkened manor through shadows that seemed to respond to Alucard's presence, flowing around rather than obscuring their path. Outside the main grounds, beyond sculpted gardens and security perimeters, lay an area Naruto hadn't previously explored, a circular clearing surrounded by ancient oak trees whose placement suggested deliberate design rather than natural growth. Alter awaited them at the clearing's edge, his butler's attire replaced by combat gear that emphasized mobility. The thin wires Naruto had identified as his primary weapons gleamed in moonlight, wrapped around gloved fingers with practiced readiness. "Sir, Integra's instructions are explicit," Walter informed them with professional detachment. "The experiment proceeds under controlled conditions. Immediate termination should either participant display signs of dimensional instability or loss of conscious control." At the clearing's center stood stone markers arranged in patterns Naruto recognized from his research with Yumiko, ritual configurations designed to contain supernatural energies rather than human participants. The preparation spoke to serious purpose behind what Alucard had presented as casual curiosity. These containment measures, Naruto observed, they're designed specifically for interdimensional energy interactions. "Hellsing has encountered boundary phenomena before," Walter confirmed, though never under circumstances as potentially informative as these. As they took positions at opposite sides of the ritual circle, Alucard removed his coat and hat, handing them to Walter with uncharacteristic formality. "Begin with baseline abilities," he instructed Naruto. "We'll establish comparative parameters before exploring higher manifestations." Naruto Evaded his Sharingan but maintained standard chakra flow rather than accessing Kurama's power. Agreed. Physical capabilities first, then energy projection, finally unique manifestations. What follow? Ed defied conventional description as combat, experiment, or ritual, elements of all three intermingling as two beings with fundamentally different yet conceptually related powers engaged in systematic comparison of abilities. Physical speed and strength testing revealed Alucard's vampiric enhancements paralleled chakra-boosted parameters, though implemented through different metaphysical frameworks. Shadow manipulation demonstrated surprising convergence, Naruto's shadow clones and Alucard's familiars representing different expressions of consciousness extension through external manifestation. Most revealing were the perceptual abilities, Sharingan tracking proving effective against vampiric movement while Alucard's sensory capabilities similarly countered shinobi stealth techniques. When Naruto attempted basic genjutsu, Alucard's resistance proved substantial but not absolute, suggesting shared foundational principles in how both powers affected consciousness. Fascinating, Alucard commented during momentary pause. Regenerating an arm Naruto had removed with wind-enhanced chakra blade. Your techniques operate through structured energy projection rather than biological transformation, yet achieve similar functional outcomes. Different paths to similar destinations, Naruto agreed, observing how his Sharingan perceived Alucard's regeneration, not as chakra flow but as pattern, reasserting itself through conceptual rather than purely physical processes. The experiment progressed to higher manifestations, Naruto accessing portions of Kurama's chakra while Alucard released progressive restriction levels on his vampiric powers. With each escalation, Walter's monitoring intensified, the butler's expression reflecting professional concern as energy patterns became increasingly complex. When Naruto manifested his Nine Tails chakra mode, golden energy forming distinctive cloak around his body, something unexpected occurred. Alucard's shadows responded not with resistance but resonance. Crimson patterns appearing within the darkness that mirrored Naruto's chakra configuration. It recognizes something familiar, Alucard observed with genuine surprise. As though remembering connection presumed severed centuries ago. The observation aligned precisely with their research, suggesting the original power transfer between dimensions had indeed been bidirectional, creating systems that retained fundamental compatibility despite centuries of separate evolution. Naruto's Sharingan perceived patterns within Alucard's manifestations that corresponded to chakra network structures, while Alucard identified elements in Naruto's techniques that paralleled vampiric essence manipulation. Your shadow clones, Alucard noted as the experiment continued, they're fully independent manifestations rather than mere projections, complete consciousness temporarily diversified rather than simulated. Similar to how your familiars retain identity and purpose from their original forms, Naruto confirmed. His Sharingan analyzing the complex patterns through which Alucard's captured souls maintained coherence within his vampiric essence. The parallels extended beyond technique. To fundamental principles, both powers represented methods of transcending standard human limitations through integration of external energy sources. Where shinobi channeled chakra through trained pathways using hand signs and visualization, vampires processed blood essence through transformed biology using will and instinctual understanding. As their experiment approached its conclusion, Alucard proposed final demonstration, simultaneous manifestation of their highest controlled power states to observe direct interaction. Naruto accessed his Six Paths Sage mode, combining Kurama's chakra with natural energy in perfect balance, while Alucard released his level 1 restriction, manifesting his familiar composed shadow form with thousands of captured souls temporarily expressed. The resulting energy interaction exceeded even Walter's cautious predictions, golden chakra and crimson shadows intermingling at the ritual circle's center to create patterns visible not just to participants but apparently across dimensional boundaries. For brief, startling moment, both Naruto and Alucard perceived something beyond their immediate reality, glimpses of other worlds, other manifestations of their respective powers. Potential rather than actual existences. Enough, Walter commanded, his wires forming containment pattern around the energy confluence. Readings indicate dimensional membrane stress exceeding safety parameters. Both participants immediately reduced their manifestations, allowing the anomalous energy pattern to dissipate gradually rather than collapse catastrophically. As the phenomenon faded, Naruto retained perfect Sharingan-preserved memory of what they'd briefly witnessed, alternative expressions of the same fundamental powers across different dimensional configurations. Well, Alucard broke the silence that followed, uncharacteristic thoughtfulness replacing his usual sardonic amusement. That was considerably more informative than anticipated. Naruto nodded agreement, deactivating his Sharingan as they exited the ritual circle. The connection runs deeper than historical transfer, its fundamental compatibility between different expressions of the same underlying principles. Which explains why the conquest ritual succeeded where modern attempts fail, Walter concluded, his analytical mind immediately identifying implications. He wasn't forcing connection between disparate powers but recognizing inherent resonance between variants of the same fundamental energy. And why Sarada's condition presents as hybrid manifestation rather than simple deterioration, Naruto added. Connections forming rapidly, she's not suffering from incompatible powers in conflict but incomplete integration of what should naturally function as unified system. Alucard retrieved his coat from where Walter had placed it, his movements deliberate as he processed implications. The Major's obsession with dimensional crossing makes considerably more sense in this context. He doesn't merely seek new territory, he pursues power integration comparable to what we've just demonstrated. The strategic implications expanded exponentially, Millennium's research revealed as attempt to recreate interdimensional power exchange that had originally created vampiric abilities, but under controlled conditions that would allow directed rather than natural evolution of the resulting capabilities. We need to document everything we observed, Naruto stated with renewed urgency. The interaction patterns, the dimensional resonance, the structural similarities between chakra and vampiric essence. Indeed, Walter concurred, Sir Integra will want comprehensive analysis before tomorrow's meeting with Lady Winterfield. This contextualizes the historical accounts in entirely new light. As they returned to the manor through moonlit grounds, Naruto found himself contemplating broader implications beyond Sarada's immediate condition or Millennium's tactical objectives. The fundamental compatibility between Sharingan and vampiric abilities suggested deeper connection between dimensions than mere historical accident, design rather than coincidence, purpose rather than random interaction. You're troubled by the implications, Alucard observed as they walked, his perception sharper than his casual manner typically revealed. Not troubled, Naruto corrected. Recalibrating. If these powers were meant to function as integrated system rather than separate manifestations, it changes our understanding of both their origin and proper application. Broken halves to separated aspects of unified whole, Alucard summarized with uncharacteristic philosophical precision. Which raises intriguing questions about what complete integration might and who or what designed such potential in the first place. That question lingered unspoken between them as they reached the manor's entrance, where Integra awaited with composed expectation. Her expression revealed she had monitored the experiment through Walter's communications and understood its significance without requiring immediate explanation. Document everything, she instructed simply. Separately. Then compare notes for consistency. We need objective record of what occurred. As Naruto complied with her directive, sequestering himself in assigned quarters to record observations while memories remained fresh. He found himself returning repeatedly to the momentary glimpse of alternative dimensions their power interaction had briefly revealed. Among those fragments of potential realities, he had glimpsed Sarada, not as she currently existed, struggling with uncontrolled transformation, but as she might become with properly integrated abilities. That potential vision provided both hope and direction. Confirmation that her condition represented not irreversible corruption but incomplete transition toward what these powers were designed to become when properly unified. The path to helping her now lay not in suppressing vampiric aspects of her awakening abilities but guiding integration between those aspects and her natural Sharingan inheritance. Outside his window, the full moon continued its passage across night sky, symbolic of illumination gradually replacing shadow in their understanding of the crimson inheritance that connected two worlds through blood, power, and purpose yet to be fully revealed. Chapter 3 End. The End. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.